Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a recap and breakdown compilation of The Last of Us Season 1. Every one of our breakdowns and analyses of the 9 episodes of the first season compiled into one very long video at the request of many of you seeking to catch up before Season 2 premieres tomorrow, Sunday, April 13th. Our in-depth breakdown of that episode will upload on the New Rockstars channel on Monday, April 14th. But here in this video, we have compiled our breakdowns from 2023, Season 1, Episodes 1 through 9, covering Joel and Ellie's backstories, how the Cordyceps infection outbreak happened, and all the trauma from Tess, Bill and Frank, Henry and Sam, David, Riley, and St. Mary's Hospital. Yes, all of these videos do already exist in separate forms on the New Rockstars channel, so if you already watched those, you don't have to watch this video again, but I think it would be helpful to review them to catch up. And at the end of this compilation will be my primer of all the new characters in Season 2, some news about Season 3, and what other pre-outbreak scenes we might flash back to in Season 2. And don't worry, we've taken great pains to ensure that any possible spoilers for the big moments of Season 2 will be saved for a Spores of Spoilers section at the very end of this video. Also, we do have some really great The Last of Us inspired shirts available on our merch store, nerdriot.shop, which is a great way to support us here at New Rockstars. Okay, take it away, Erik from 2023. Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of HBO's The Last of Us Episode 1, When You're Lost in the Darkness, based on the Naughty Dog games written by Neil Druckmann and co-created by Druckmann and Chernobyl writer Craig Mazin. Okay, this premiere episode opens with a prologue that's actually not in the games, a 1968 talk show discussing global pandemics.
And that's your biggest worry?
Yes, any kind of virus, but most probably something similar to influenza.
Because of air travel?
Through the air. Coughing.
I'm sorry, I meant people on planes. That was something you described in your book.
Now, in history, this would have been one of the earliest broadcasts about epidemiology, a topic that we are all now familiar with, having lived through COVID. But by setting this opening scene in the 1960s, this series sets our notions of pandemics as a bit antiquated and instead presents an alternate history in which things could have played out very differently. One hypothetical forgotten because viruses are really what we feared from here forward, not fungi. Also, Ellie later deduces that the 60s songs on the radio are Joel's smuggler code with Bill and Frank, meaning nothing new. So this might be the show's way of saying this is really nothing new. We have known about all these natural threats for decades. This opening TV broadcast also evokes the TV broadcast that opened I Am Legend with Emma Thompson as a doctor in the past proclaiming the cure for cancer, which led to that present-day viral outbreak. The host of this TV show is played by Josh Brenner, Big Head from Silicon Valley, and the fungosphere, Dr. Newman, is played by Josh Hanna, who played the brother in the Mummy films and a number of other great roles. He talks about a fungus that infects the mind of an ant, theorizing that such fungi could evolve to infect humans due to rising global temperatures.
One gene mutates, and an Ascomycetia, Candida, ergot, Cordyceps, Aspergillus, any one of them could become capable of burrowing into our brains and taking control not of millions of us, but billions of us.
The camera cuts to Newman right on Cordyceps because that is the name of the real-world ant-infecting fungus that Neil Druckmann based the fungus of The Last of Us games on, and it is the fungus of this story. He goes on to warn,
billions of puppets with poisoned minds, permanently fixed on one unifying goal: to spread the infection to every last human alive by any means necessary.
So if that happens,
we lose.
And during all this, the camera shows the studio audience, who look fully nonplussed and unafraid, dull-eyed puppets just ready for the taking. Now, the awesome-looking opening title animation mirrors the fungal spread that's set to haunting acoustic notes strummed by composer Gustavo Santaolalla, just like the animation that opens the games. Gustavo also composed the great music in the games, and here he works with David Fleming. But this spreading of the Cordyceps fungus reminds us of other HBO openings like Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, like it's spreading across a world map, rising its own fungal city structures that supplant our human civilization. Eventually, the fungus actually takes the shape of a map of the continental United States. And it's subtle, but you can actually see tiny spores floating from stalk to stalk. And two of the stalks take the shape of a taller person and a shorter person, representing Joel and Ellie, the focal characters of this story. Now, The Last of Us is really one of the better versions of the whole lone wolf and cub relationship, which of course Pedro Pascal also played really well in The Mandalorian. Now, the first half of this pilot episode follows Joel's daughter, Sarah, in 2003 Austin, Texas, the way part 1 of the game's prologue follows Sarah. But we spend a lot more time with Sarah on the show, which is the show's way of saying just because we get to know characters for extended sequences doesn't mean this show is not gonna kill kill them off. This is survivalist horror. It's called The Last of Us. Now, the open window blows a gentle breeze to wake up Sarah, and there are some tiny particles floating over her nose, but to be clear, Neil Druckmann did clarify that they decided that instead of spreading via airborne spores, this fungus is going to spread via these creepy oral tendrils. This is actually inspired by concept art from the game. In the game, Sarah reads a newspaper where it suggested that the fungus came from crops imported from South America, but here the radio newscaster mentions disturbances in Jakarta and riots and warnings for all Americans to get out of there, suggesting that the origin of the show might be from Indonesia or somewhere else in Southeast Asia, one of the countries bordering the Indian Ocean. But throughout the first episode, the story beats are very similar. Sarah celebrating Joel's birthday and fixing his watch as a gift, Joel fretting over a contracting job. Notice how Joel slaps his wrist after accidentally checking it for the time, a little nod that he misses having a watch that works properly, something Sarah has likely noticed. Also, in the background of this living room of this house is Joel's guitar. Joel's playing of the guitar is something that becomes very important later on in the games and probably of the show. Now, a lot of the dialogue is taken directly from the game, like Sarah later joking that she sold drugs to pay for the watch, Joel pretending that the watch didn't work, so I'm not going to point out every time a line or something is from the game exactly, but Sarah's shirt is interesting to point out. This is the same pink Halligan Drops shirt, but instead of the 2010 tour, it's now the 2002 tour. Because in the games, it takes place in 2013. In this show, the flashback takes place in 2003. Also, really cool detail, in the game, most of the tour stops on that shirt are locations you later visit in the game. Boston, Pittsburgh, Jackson, Salt Lake City, etc. All the details are very 2003 though, like a Destiny's Child Survivor poster on Sarah's wall, she's got a band tour shirt with 2002 on it, there's Dido's white flag on the radio, and in the classroom, a president, a good old George W. Bush, who before becoming president was governor of the great state of Texas. So they might have already had his photo on their wall. And in the classroom, Sarah gets distracted by this glare.
Some knowledge, shaking of heads. I swear you will use this later in life. Believe me, that's why you're here. Okay? So, use the subject, outgoing, predicate, verb.
The kid's wrist is twitching, muscle spasms being an early symptom of infection. Also, a subtle cough before the bell rings there. I love how they build the tension, because they know that we watching this are now a little triggered by hearing coughs. This episode is titled When You're Lost in the Darkness, which is the first part of the Fireflies mantra. That mantra ends with, look for the light. Here, Sarah gets distracted from the light by what? A cough. In the repair shop, the phone rings in the beginning of the scene in the background, and then a moment later, that Lebanese co-owner closes early, rushes Sarah out of there, suggesting that that call was from family in the Middle East, alerting her to how bad things are getting. And then in her neighbor's house behind Sarah, Nana contorts and her mouth opens wide as that fungus infection takes hold of her body. But she stays out of focus, so we can't really tell what's happening, which makes it even creepier. It reminds me a lot of that scene in It Chapter 2 when Pennywise takes the form of the old woman creeping in the background behind Bev. Now, Nana also refuses to eat in this scene. And remember earlier, she refused to eat those biscuits, which director Craig Mason hinted might be some breadcrumbs here that are gonna come back later. Sarah borrows the DVD Curtis and Viper 2, which is a reference to the games, Joel's favorite 80s action movie that gets referenced.
What movie are you guys gonna watch? What's Joel into?
Curtis and Viper 2. That's the one that's been on my radar for a while.
Now later that night when Sarah enters the house, which by the way, why would you do this? Notice how the wheelchair on the far right is empty. Just a little concerning sign that that fungus is now puppeting Nana's motor functions. It's just unsettling to realize that this fungus in a way fixes our physical ailments to make us more mobile. Now Brad Leland is actually Buddy Garrett from Friday Night Lights. Love seeing him show up here, and he does such a great job acting this moment. Now, what we think is his paralyzing fear and his wide eyes is actually the fungus taking over, because later when we see him in the street, he attacks someone else. He too is infected here. Now, the tendrils that snake out of Nana's mouth are even more sickening in my opinion than the spores of the game. But a little physical detail here, I love how they stick to the victim's wound as Nana raises her head. So the first time we see a bite happen, it's not a cannibalistic zombie bite. She's not trying to feast on her brains. It's a parasite transferring from one host, burrowing into the bloodstream of a new host. Now, this truck sequence is awesome. It plays out similarly to the game. We see the burning farmhouse, the way they pass the family leaving them behind, all the highways blocked off. But Craig Mazin shoots this in these amazing long takes. There's a 50-second shot from just inside the truck in which they must have perfectly timed and choreographed people running down the street lit by the truck's headlights. The fact that we stay in the chaos of the truck reminds us a lot of the amazing chaotic car long take of Children of Men. I like how it's a movie screening of Midnight Madness erupting into the street. And then as the truck backs up, the entire time in the sky, sky. I didn't notice this the first time I looked at it. You can totally see the 747 losing control up above their heads, but we don't really notice what's happening until too late because of all the chaos that's happening around us. Actually, it's that plane's front wheel that breaks off and ricochets off the building and wrecks their truck. Afterward, Tommy gets separated as Joel and Sarah are pinned on, where's that? Pioneer Way. Joel will become a bit of a westward moving pioneer on this series. But as in the game, they are stopped by a soldier who gets the order to kill them, and Joel, who either he or his brother Tommy were a Desert Storm veteran, knows what it looks like when a soldier gets a message to kill. The soldier fires on them, hitting Sarah, and Tommy kills off the soldier before he can kill Joel. Sarah bleeds out and dies. But there is something interesting that happens here. We don't actually see the exact moment Sarah dies. The camera swings over to Tommy, whose voice cracks as he says his brother's name. And then when we swing back to Sarah, her eyes are lifeless. So then we jump to 20 years later in the Boston quarantine zone, following another kid that we don't stay with for too long. They wheel him in and they give him a FEDRA patch to hold. So FEDRA is the Federal Disaster Response Agency, a FEMA-like agency from the game that becomes the country's governing military authority now. This kid sees a poster explaining how long the infection takes based on where the wound is on the body, the leg being the longest, which is where this kid's wound is. We don't even know if this kid can read, like he clearly doesn't understand what's going on, and it's especially cruel how this soldier hides her expression after he tests positive.
What if I told you that after we gave you some medicine, we're gonna find you your favorite food to eat?
And later, this poor kid is identified by his bright green shoelaces, which I think is a nod to Schindler's List when that girl in the red coat is later identified on a pile of corpses that's being carted over to be burned. And notice how, despite shoelaces being a hot commodity in the QZ, they do not scavenge this boy's shoelaces, either out of respect or maybe out of caution. Now, in the game, the infection testing process is actually revealed by an adult man testing positive in the QZ, and he gets shot right there. But this more emotionally brutal death was added to get parallelism between Joel cradling Sarah, and now Joel is numb as he cradles this dead boy. This actually was the original ending of this episode, before HBO suggested taking more time to build out the present day, and most importantly to introduce Joel to Ellie. Joel takes the worst jobs like this one and sewer maintenance, perhaps sewer maintenance to learn what the best smuggling routes are, but really also to just get the most valuable ration card so that he can bribe the soldiers. He passes some wanted posters offering a reward for Marlene. Posters like these appear in the QZ in the game. We see some amputees wearing Desert Storm shirts and a guy in a Gore Lieberman shirt for the Democratic candidates in the 2000 election, Al Gore and Joe Lieberman. All of their fashion and technology froze in the early 2000s when everything fell apart. We also see some guys assigning to paint over some graffiti left by the Fireflies. That's their sigil, and we know that they're recruiting from throughout the QZ. The amputees we see might be a world detail of people having cut off wounded limbs to prevent infection. In the game, it's not totally clear if amputation works like that. In the Left Behind game, Ellis had his arm amputated, but we never really find out for sure if it worked because he ended up bleeding out before they could find out. 3 trespassers are hung in North Square. You can see signs for North Square. In real life Boston, this is a historic area. Well, the whole city's a historic area, but this is a special area where Paul Revere's house is. These kinds of executions by British soldiers were part of what agitated Americans to revolt in Revere's time. Joel meets up with this one soldier, and we see this soldier's hand twitching, showing how bad he's jonesing for these pills, but also how he will have a very itchy trigger finger later. Joel knows how bad this soldier is addicted.
Or I could just shoot you.
Yeah, but then what would you do?
I love the detail that Joel needs the bag back because plastic bags without holes in them would be something in limited supply. As in the game, Joel is a smuggler who's always holding on to odds and ends that he can workshop into useful tools. Tess chats with Robert, whose guys jumped her, about a car battery that she paid for and he sold to someone else, a car battery that we later learned didn't even work. Now in the game, it's actually a cache of guns that Robert scammed from Joel and Tess. But this show seems to establish Joel and Tess as a bit less bloodthirsty and also wants to establish a stronger bond between Joel and his brother Tommy, and Joel having to travel westward to find Tommy before he ever meets Ellie. Ultimately, this introduces Joel as, at first, a more peaceful, protective figure, which Pedro Pascal is so good at, as Din Djarin on The Mandalorian. We meet Ellie, who initially goes under the alias of Veronica, played by Bella Ramsey, Lyanna Mormont from Game of Thrones. The Fireflies have chained her up and they test her cognitive and motor functions. Why are they doing this? Well, we later learn that she has been infected, and they're trying to prove that the infection didn't really affect her. Now, this cell only has "when you're lost in the darkness" written on red on the wall, but not the full phrase, like it's written in yellow outside in the area where Joel meets up with the soldier. It's just a way of showing how how the Fireflies do not need the full propaganda internally, just bits and pieces of it to remind them of their mission but in different contexts. Now this guy who operates the long distance radio takes Joel's cigarettes, which remember was the $5 extra that Joel got from the soldier. The radio operator takes the cigarettes before he tells Joel that he just heard nothing from Tommy, which kind of sucks. Joel just had to pay for bad news. It's any answer at all that costs the payment. So Joel drunkenly plots a westward trip to find Tommy, and we see the watch that Sarah repaired, its face broken in 2 spots. Now, when Jess joins him in bed, she rolls him away from her so that he won't see her facial wounds right away and get worked up when he's super drunk and high. Like throughout the morning, he doesn't even notice until he raises his head to see her face the next morning during breakfast. Now, I might be wrong, but that woman they had passed in the wheelchair might be the same pregnant woman who radioed her parent earlier that they were about to be a grandparent. It's hard to tell if the woman in the wheelchair has her baby bump still. I don't really know what happened. I just hope that pregnant woman ended up being okay. Marlene gives Ellie this knife that Ellie from here forward is extremely attached to, and Marlene reveals that she knows her name is not Veronica and that she was actually the one who put Ellie in the federal military school. Marlene also brings up someone named Riley. There's a lot more to all this that I will bring up at the end in the spoiler section. Joel and Tess are scared when they find a recent infected victim.
You think he came down after he was infected?
Maybe down here is where he was infected.
Now, beyond the yuck of the Cordyceps outgrowth, the fact that this person was pinned against a wall, I think is what is most unnerving about this. It's as if he was on the ground when he died, and then the fungus lifted his corpse up as it grew to find other victims. Joel and Tess find Robert and his guys already dead, and Marlene and her crew already wounded. It's really interesting that we don't see this go down. We come upon it after. Just like we didn't really see any initial conflict between Robert's crew and Tess, we didn't see those trespassers actually get hanged. Think about it, this is HBO. They can get as violent as they want. But in the second half of this episode, they particularly withhold the violence. The violence in the QZ in the second half of this episode is rarely ever shown happening. It's more quiet, it's hinted at. Crime scenes stumbled upon after the fact, not explicitly shown. And I'm gonna explain why in a bit. Ellie finds Joel's local radio and his book of Billboard #1 hits with this code sheet for communications from Bill and Frank, 60s songs, meaning nothing new, 70s songs, meaning new stock is in, and 80s songs Ellie's able to deduce later using Wham's Wake Me Up to trick Joel, meaning trouble out there. And this was after Joel went in and out of sleep to the sounds of Sarah's dying breaths. Before, when he slept, when he was drunk and loaded, he heard his brother Tommy shouting his name, which is probably a memory from their past fight. So Joel and Tess and Ellie head out past the wall where they're stopped by that druggy soldier from before, who tests Ellie to learn that she is positive. So Ellie stabs him with a knife, and Joel, flashing back to the parallel moment when he faced a soldier who killed his daughter, finally lets his rage boil over and he snaps. This is what Marlene referred to by what they're capable of, and why this episode held off showing us Joel being violent in this modern era until this moment, despite the early section of the game here showing Joel and Tess disposing of and killing a ton of guys. Instead, we just get this shocking and singular punctuated moment of violence from our hero that feels especially earned, grounded in the most devastating loss in his life, and directly motivating why protecting Ellie is so important to him. And specifically what triggered the memory for him was the light. He was blinded by this soldier's flashlight just like he was blinded by the headlights back in Texas, because when you're lost in the darkness, you must look for the light. Craig Mazin had an interesting point about Ellie in this moment.
When Ellie watches him beating a man to death, she is activated. Earlier in the episode, when Sarah sees him killing this old woman who's infected, who he has to kill,
You killed her.
she cries. Ellie likes it.
And in the companion podcast from HBO, Mazin talked about this series being a love story, but how unconditional love can be a very dangerous thing.
We will continue to come back to the notion that love conquers all, and that's problematic. That we think of love as this solely positive thing, a beautiful thing, and it is. But love, especially the love that a parent has for a child, is primal, and it can lead to the most intense fear, and the most intense fear can lead to the most intense behavior, including violence. And if you scratch the surface of tribalism, racism, xenophobia, you will find love. Love is not always good.
And the music that plays over this ending comes from Joel's local radio from Bill and Frank, Depeche Mode's Never Let Me Down Again, an 80s track meaning danger is ahead. Now, Depeche Mode's song is about taking a ride with your best friend, but that friend is really addiction. So this bond forming between Ellie and Joel, not necessarily a healthy thing. And Mazin promises that we will hear this song again this season at a key moment. The toppled towers that they head toward on their way to the State House compare to the opening titles. The road of the fungus spreading toward its towering stalks, because the path before all these characters is truly infected. Now onto our spoiler corner for folks more familiar with the games and comics, want to talk about these details, or just people who don't really give a shit. So Marlene actually knew Ellie's mother, Anna, long before Ellie was wounded and infected. This switchblade used to belong to Anna, as we learn in the prequel comics American Dreams, and becomes Ellie's primary weapon in the games. That could be why she's so pissed when Joel steps on it and swipes it away. He's essentially stepping on her mother's memory. However, in this show, it seems like Ellie did not know Marlene before Ellie was captured by the Fireflies. It seems like her mother's relationship with Marlene is a full mystery to her. Now, Riley was Ellie's teenage partner from the Left Behind DLC that was initially referenced in the Last of Us game. This is the girl she snuck out with and hung out with at the mall, which is where they were both infected, but Ellie survived. Riley will appear later in the season, played by Storm Reed. There's actually a shot in the trailer of them taking a photo together. And future Erik butting back in here to say that this Joel jacket I'm wearing comes from our friends at Huckberry, and grabbing one of these from the link in the description is yet another great way to support us here at New Rockstars if you need some great outerwear like this. I mean, it's still cold out in a lot of parts of the world. Episode 2 opens in Jakarta, Indonesia, which came up on a radio broadcast last episode.
Disturbances in Jakarta, but are advised.
It's September 24th, 2003, 2 days before Outbreak Day, and you can already hear sirens starting. In this restaurant, we see close-ups of flour-based food in people's dishes, but Ibu Ratna is eating only skewered meat and a salad. When these officers enter, all the patrons go silent. Now, in 2003, Indonesia was under a period of reform under President Megawati Sukarno Putri, but this was right after a tumultuous New Order period that lasted from 1966 to 98 under Suharto, who's a military dictator. These patrons would definitely be old enough to remember a time when badges showing up during lunch meant trouble. Just really like this detail. The officer Hidayat apologizes for interrupting the lunch, and Ibu says no need, she was just finishing. Cautiously abundant courtesy, because both of these people are scared out of their minds. They're wanting the other one to like them since they believe the other holds their life in their hands. Now, Ibu is a professor of mycology, the study of fungi. The front desk translates to Ministry of Health of Indonesia, and we pass signs for SARS, which earlier that year, February 2003, was the bigger infection of concern, a respiratory virus, largely in China. The authority tells Ibu to identify the specimen.
Kami butuh bantuan Bu Ratna untuk meneliti spesimen yang telah kami persiapkan.
Ibu mungkin
Pendapat Bu Ratna yang saya butuhkan.
Yeah, it's clear that Ibu was brought in as a second opinion and they are hoping for better news from her. In general, I love this intro because many associate infections from other countries with a kind of xenophobic hypochondria. Oh no, can I even drink the water in that country? But we see here that it wasn't immediate chaos in the streets of Jakarta. An academic expert in Ground Zero diagnosed it immediately and still could not stop it. Ibu examines his corpse and first notices a bullet wound in the head, not a good sign. She makes an incision on the leg, revealing a layer of cordyceps tissue directly beneath the skin, which is crazy. It's like the stuffing of a plush toy. This means it's not muscle tissue that's moving the limbs of the infected, it's just all fungus tendrils underneath there. And she checks the throat and yuck, living cordyceps tendril reaches out for a hug. Even through Ibu's plastic protective suit, the fungus knows that she's there. As she flees from the room, the tendrils continue to reach upward out of the mouth. This scene reminded me a lot of the autopsy scene in The Silence of the Lambs when they realized that the moth cocoon was embedded in the victim's throat. It's sickening, but it's also the key clue that Clarice later uses to identify Buffalo Bill, and here in this scene foreshadowing the kiss of death that will take Tess. Hidayat confirms the transmission happened 30 hours prior at a flour and grain factory on the west side of Jakarta, and Ibu calls it the perfect substrate. The substrate meaning a surface or material on which an organism can live. This confirms my theory that the fungus is spread by flour in the food supply. Jakarta has the world's largest flour mill, and last episode Sarah noted that they were out of pancake mix. The Adlers offer biscuits that Joel turned down. Ms. Adler makes raisin cookies that Sarah hates. We get a close-up of the heat rising and those cookies growing, and later that night Joel forgets to pick up cake. Now this shot of Ibu is an extended multi-minute take, and I just love that we never cut away and we have to stay with her in this horror for this whole unbroken moment. Ibu attempts some contact tracing, learning that they don't know who bit the woman before the factory, and then learns,
Lalu pekerja yang lain bagaimana?
14 orang hilang.
Yeah, the moment she hears 14, her hand rattles the tea. She never takes a sip of it either, afraid to ingest anything. Like Dr. Newman in episode 1, Ibu says that there is no treatment possible, and instead just looks at this military officer to give him one solution that he'll understand.
Bom. Mulailah pengoboman.
Yeah, and I like how even in another language, the word is the same, bomb. And it's the same solution the Americans try on their own cities.
Is this where they bombed?
Yeah. They hit most of the big cities like this. They had to slow the spread somehow. Worked here, but it didn't in most places.
So then we open on Ellie sleeping in the fetal position, surrounded by green moss, just a pure natural state like a fetus in utero, the next stage of human evolution potentially resistant to the fungus. A butterfly flaps past her, recalling the butterflies on Sarah's pillowcase, as Ellie supplants Sarah as the daughter figure that Joel must protect. Butterflies are symbols of transformation, from the caterpillar to the cocoon, metapod to butterfree! And as the world goes through biological transformations around them, these characters must undergo psychological transformations in order to adapt and to survive. Change is inevitable. Now, this room used to be a salon. You look at the door, that's Supercuts! This would be a place where you do get makeovers and transform your look. That's a magazine that you flip through for hairstyle inspiration that Tess tosses Ellie to use as toilet paper. Now, like Professor Ibu, Joel's hand also trembles, but from his savage beating of that soldier the night before, he is shaking because for the first time in decades, he feels something.
You need to stop talking about this kid like she's got some kind of life in front of her.
He's trying to stifle the affection he's feeling by likening Ellie with Sarah and how quickly Sarah's future was snuffed out. Now, Tess is really interesting to watch in this scene because notice how overnight she's become a true believer.
She made it through the night. It doesn't matter.
Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann revealed that they actually wrote and shot a whole backstory for Tess that they ultimately removed. Tess was a wife and a mother, and both her husband and her son got infected. She had to kill her husband, but she couldn't bring herself to kill her kid, so she just locked him in the basement. And presumably, he's now a clicker, according to Mazin. So Tess's newfound hope for Ellie, her hope for redemption, and for all the shit she's done, is grounded in what she did to her family. Post-apocalyptic Boston looks incredible, with vines growing out everywhere from the crumbling buildings and the corroding cars. Really smart VFX detail here. Joel's head blocks out a glare from a background building window, tricking our brains into thinking everything in the background is practical and affecting us physically, when in reality that leaning skyscraper is totally VFX. Like in the game, the atmosphere is immersive, and the production designers just did a really good job blending the foreground practical sets and the background VFX so you don't really know where the line is. The police car they pass is a Boston PD Ford Expedition, the make, model, and paint job even that Suffolk County cops used in the year 2003. They also step past a stuffed giraffe, which could be a nod to the giraffe that you run into and give a good boy pat in the game. Ellie tells Tess that she was bitten after sneaking into the boarded up mall in the QZ.
So it was just you in there alone?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ellie sniffs because there is more to that story, which I'll get to at the end in Spoiler Corner. Ellie also shares some myths that she's heard.
So there aren't super infected that explode fungus spores on you?
Shit, I hope not.
Or ones with split open heads that see in the dark like bats?
The second kind refers to clickers. And yeah, definitely we're gonna meet a few of them in this episode. I'll talk about the various stages of infected in Spoiler Corner, just in case you want to be surprised by what's coming. I love how this hotel has become an entirely new ecosystem, a swampy pond. A frog perches on the keys of the piano, creating a diegetic horror score. Later, Ellie adds to this music when she gets scared by the corpse. Every bottle and glass they pass in the hotel now has plant life growing out of it, as water and nutrients would have collected inside and created a sort of petri dish ecosystem for life to form. Joel gives Tess a boost so that she can crawl through the cave-in. Joel and Tess giving each other boosts and pulling each other up on ledges like this is just a common move that you do in this early section of the game. Joel and Ellie have this moment alone, and Ellie asks how long infected live.
Well, some last about a month or two. But there's others been walking around about 20 years.
Yeah, a bit of foreshadowing for some longtime infected hosts whose fungal layers just keep growing and growing. Again, I'll explain more of this in Spoiler Corner. The three of them look down and see rows of infected laying down below.
The last time we were here, they were still deep inside the buildings. Then I guess enough people came through looking for the QZ. We went inside seeking shelter. And that's how they get more and more of the city bit by bit, year after year.
So this tells us that the Boston QZ is not necessarily secure permanently, and explains why Joel and Tess were ready to leave it even before meeting Ellie. The infected all react to sunlight in a wave.
They're connected.
More than you know. The fungus also grows underground. Long fibers like wires, some of them stretching over a mile. You step on a patch of Cordyceps in one place, and you can wake a dozen infected from somewhere else.
Okay, so this whole idea of Cordyceps hive mind, like the neural chemical network of Pandora and Avatar, is a new thing in the HBO series. It's not something really in the game, or at least not established yet. We'd probably know by now if it was, but to be clear, when we're using a term like hive mind, we should separate the idea of mind from the idea of cognition. Behind the scenes at New Rockstars, our sales guy Berg was giving me an amazing lecture on this subject. Both the idea of a mind and the idea of cognition are metaphysical concepts debated by scientists, especially when it comes to things like AI. So it's not that fungi fungi are sentient the way humans are and are working collectively to outsmart us and hunt us, but they do collectively react to environmental stimuli and are capable as a colony of living for years and years and years and accomplishing some complex things. But at that point you get to the debate of, well, are humans just reacting to environmental stimuli? Like, I don't know, I get hungry at sundown, sleepy at midnight, and every time my wife revs up the microwave, I piss my pants and forget who I am for a half hour or so. But this change to the show accomplishes two things. One, there's some thematic takeaway here that Cordyceps is beating us by being more communicative and better connected than humanity is, like arguably the more worthy species of taking over planet Earth. But two, it gives the fungi a ranged threat that you could say they lose by the show omitting the spore component of them. This is just a new way that the fungus can get us.
You're not immune from being ripped apart.
Now, in the museum, they passed displays of the Boston Tea Party and portraits of founding fathers, all covered in dried cordyceps, as if all of American history was rendered pointless by a fungal infection that swallowed our entire society. The infected corpses they passed still bear some human features that are just eerily preserved, because as we saw before, the muscle tissue beneath the skin gets replaced by the fungus, so that delays the decomposition that our bodily fluids would have caused. They end up trapped in a room with two clickers. Now, these are the blind infected individuals formed by the fungus splitting open their heads, and like bats, they use echolocations like clicks to perceive their surroundings. Now, last week, my buddy Ryan Airy at Screen Crush pointed out the motif of ticking clocks in the episode 1 flashbacks, and you may have noticed when Sarah dies, Joel's watch breaks and freezes on the exact moment of her death. And now, in this moment, I loved hearing how the clockwork ticking of the old world has been replaced with sporadic random clicking of the clickers, because now time truly has no meaning. Ellie, though, is unable to silence her own gasp. Notice how this clicker, compared to other infected runners or stalkers, wears clothes that are more worn down. That's because to get like this, clickers must have been infected for over a year, longer than most other infected that we see. His wet and slimy head has had its skull split down to the top row of teeth in the palate, but the fungus has otherwise left the mouth intact because it needs the mouth for oral transmission. When Joel shoots the chest, it's ineffective because the fungus doesn't feel pain and really doesn't need any of the vital organs that would have been in the chest region, only really the brain and the brainstem. Joel removes the bullets from his revolver. Just the little sound of the shells alerts that clicker. And I love how the camera stays on Joel as the clicker starts to move toward us, but frames it out so that, like Joel, we just have to guess where it is. And they upped the volume on those clicks to signal to us that he is now just a few feet away around the corner. So Joel, having faced these things before, knows how to use the clicker's own echolocation methods to echolocate it. And notice how we don't see where Tess is for most of the sequence, or how she loses her clicker, just a little warning sign that something probably went down off screen with her. Now, Tess says there's no going back home. And notice how their path through this museum caves in behind them, which is similar to the experience of playing the game. And many games, really, your path closes off behind you and there's only one path forward. It's just so sad to rewatch this episode from here forward for Anna Torv's performance, like when Joel wraps tape around her foot and she just looks at him with tears in her eyes.
There's probably more ahead.
So we'll deal with it then.
Tess gets a moment alone, and her hand does twitch a bit. Not sure if it's voluntary or not, but muscle spasms are a symptom. And notice how Tess yelps in pain when her arm on the side where the bite is grabs the ladder. Joel, after watching Ellie go down the ladder, very suddenly looks down at his watch, unable to look at Ellie without thinking of his daughter Sarah. Tess walks ahead of them toward the State House, more in a rush than they are, and to hide her shoulder bite. Notice how when she turns around, you can see blood sprayed on her neck. Joel doesn't notice because he's too busy looking at Ellie's more recent scratch, worried that she's gonna turn. So when they get to the State House, they find everyone dead already, which is another contrast from the games. In the games, Tess has to hold all this down as Fedra soldiers come in, and there's a big shootout. But like last episode, this series shows the heroes in the present day stumbling upon the aftermath of the human versus human shootouts, instead of taking down person after person like you do sometimes in the game, except for specific moments from Joel. Here, Joel explains what happened.
One of them got bit, the healthy ones fought the sick ones, everyone lost.
And Tess reveals her infected bite and compares it to Ellie's scratch that has no effect.
This is real. Josh is real. I need you to get her to Bill and Frank's.
And yes, Tess's hand tremor is more severe now. Tess says,
I never ask you for anything, not to feel the way I felt, not to, will you shut the up because I don't have time.
It's just so tragic. In her final minutes, she doesn't even have time to profess her love for Joel because she knows that they missed their window. And she continues,
you get her there, you keep her alive, and you set everything right. All the shit we did.
Yes, Tess sees the promise of Joel getting Ellie to safety and a possible cure to Cordyceps as her one hope for redemption. Joel shoots the infected host, and the Cordyceps in the soil latches onto his hands. We see the fungal colony at work. Similar tendrils snake under a fingernail, lifted a little. Ugh, I know, but the dinner bell has been rung. Actually, the stalker we see here up close is the same one that'll eventually plant the smooch on Tess. Tess sets up the place to blow up and has this final moment with Joel.
Say who you can say.
No!
You can tell that Joel totally wants to give her a goodbye kiss right now, but at this point, a kiss with an infected is a kiss of death. So this is the closest they get, and all the infected arrive, and this stalker closes in for a kiss. And in addition to the undeniable grossness of the tendril transmission, it's just an additional violation because a kiss is such an intimate gesture. Now this actor's named Philippe Berjou, and look how bad this guy looks. When you lose that fungal makeup, hello there. So this kiss just feels like an especially cruel perversion, reminding me of the overtly sexual design of the xenomorph anatomy in Alien. This is another example of the showrunner's subversive theme of the series, the danger of love. This kiss is a loving gesture, and even from the perspective of the Cordyceps, it is a kind of loving embrace. It's one piece of the fungus recognizing and connecting with another piece of the fungus. Yet, that love is destructive and violent, and let's never forget that. But Tess is able to bring the suffering to an end by finally igniting the lighter, which she drops thanks to her hand's muscle spasms. And so the room explodes, bringing us back to Professor Ibu's only real solution to deal with the infected bomb. Okay, on to spoiler corner. For those of you who know what's coming in the games, or for those of you who don't really mind, I will give additional warnings for any big spoilers like character deaths or other big twists that the show has not indicated at all. And so for the spoiler corner, it's just gonna be some general knowledge that some may consider to be fun surprises for the coming episodes, which is why I put it here. Okay, so yeah, Ellie was not the only one in the mall. Riley was there with her, but like Joel not wanting to talk about Sarah, Ellie doesn't want to talk about her lost loved one. Notice how Ellie also indicated no boyfriend is gonna come looking for her. And then Ellie's mention of super infected that explode fungus spores on you that Tess and Joel thought was a myth, totally a nod to bloaters, one of which shows up in the trailer, so we know a bloater is coming. Bloaters are the several-year-old infected hosts with fungal layers that have formed like armor and tear chunks of that fungus off themselves to throw like spore bombs. Actually, early in the game, there is a Fedra handout showing the stages of infected, from runner to stalker to clicker to... and then the bloater stage is torn off. And this is a breakdown of The Last of Us Episode 3, long time. This emotional episode titled after the 1970 Linda Ronstadt song that breaks our hearts again and hopefully now gets the Stranger Things running up that hill treatment. Last episode of The Last of Us started and ended with an oral transmission of the Cordyceps fungus, a kiss of death for Tess that serves as a grim reflection of the writer's theme of the danger of love. And the opening credits echo that, with a vision of a human face, mouth open, formed by this fungus. Joel's knuckles are still bloody from beating that soldier in episode 1, despite him telling Tess at the top of last episode that it would heal quickly. We see him stacking rocks, which some hikers do to mark trails, some to practice mindfulness, but is also some ancient culture's way of marking graves. So right now, this is the best Joel can really do to give Tess a funeral, because Joel and Ellie are still not really able to communicate about it. Yeah, it's interesting how Joel doesn't really know Ellie as well as he assumes he does. Ellie actually looked way more pissed off at Joel. She's blaming him for Tess's death. Ellie asks about the scar on Joel's head.
Someone shot at me and missed.
See, that's cool.
Now, actually, in the game, Joel has a scar on the bridge of his nose, which is a very subtle detail from the night Sarah was shot. He doesn't have a scar on his nose before, but he actually incurs this injury during this attack. He has to carry this reminder of his daughter's death with him on his face from here forward. But in the show, I assume this scar on his cheek is from some other incident. He definitely didn't have it in that 2010 garden party that they had with Bill and Frank. So the sign in front of the Cumberland Farms has had a few letters dropped, and I want to say the top word was children, and then beneath, something about rations, maybe? I don't know, maybe with the panic over flour, rations were only given to families with children in those few days. Inside, Ellie finds a Mortal Kombat 2 game box.
You ever play this one? I had a friend who knew everything about this game. There's this one character named Melina who takes off her mask and she has monster teeth and then she swallows you whole and barfs out your bones.
She's referring to Melina's fatality move, which of course was the kiss of death. A kiss of death is also how the Cordyceps is transmitted. Ellie asks,
is there anything bad in here?
Just you.
Yeah, Joel's making a callback to last episode in the supercuts.
There's not gonna be anything bad in here?
Just you.
It's a bit of a dad joke, but it's also a lesson from Joel. The natural threats we face are unfeeling and amoral. It's only really humanity that has the capacity for evil. Ellie finds a box of tampons and this half-buried stalker. Now just a reminder, runners are the early stages of the infected. Stalkers are the half-mushroom-headed who are under a year of infected, and then beyond that are the clickers. They're the blind, fully covered heads who are over a year of being infected. We will meet stages beyond that as we go. But I love this shot, this close-up. We can really see the prosthetic makeup from Pat Fode, who also worked on Chernobyl, House of the Dragon, and Stranger Things. It just makes this fungal outgrowth look even more vivid than the clickers are from a distance. This is gross, but you can see beads of pus on the cheek, and then chunks of flesh on the stalks that are growing out of the head. That yellow infected eye continues to follow Ellie's knife, so for now the fungus is still puppeting the host optic nerve. But Ellie is testing to see if there is a soul inside, recalling her question last week to Joel.
Was it hard? Like knowing they were people once?
Joel stashes his rifle.
Not much ammo out there for this thing. Makes it mostly useless.
Well, if you're just gonna leave it there.
No.
Solid practical logic here. As in the gameplay, if your weapon runs out of ammo, it's useless.
It's out of ammo!
And for Joel's case here, it would be extra weight and something he could lose that might be weaponized against him in the future. Ellie asks how the infection started.
How did it even start? If you have to get bit to be infected, then who bit the first person? Was it a monkey? I bet it was a monkey.
Yeah, I love this because it's kind of a reference to the movie 28 Days Later, where the outbreak came from infected chimps, and that movie came out in June 2003 and would have been the most recent major zombie movie before Outbreak Day. So naturally, there would be some monkey theory that would have made it into the urban myths that Ellie knows. And Joel further confirms the flour theory that I discussed back in week 1.
Some of it got into the food supply. Probably a basic ingredient like flour, sugar, bread, cereal, pancake mix.
Now, I thought Joel was joking around about being on Atkins, but if he really was avoiding carbs, that would explain why he didn't get infected. And yes, that pause on pancake mix, Joel was remembering Sarah trying to make him pancakes on his birthday. They pass a mass grave of people that Fedra forced evac and then killed when there wasn't enough room in a QZ. And we linger on the remains of a parent and their child, framed with Joel, the parent figure, with Ellie, the child figure, in the background. Now, this is incredibly morbid, but artistically, I really appreciate the transition on the clothes this family was last wearing, flashing back 20 years earlier. This mass grave is a fate far worse than any of the infected, if you ask me, who one could argue were overtaken by nature to grow into something monstrous, but also somewhat beautiful. Meet Bill, Nick Offerman, who watches all this going down from his survivalist basement.
Not today, you New World Order jackboot fucks.
New World Order was a globalist conspiracy theory that grew in popularity during the 90s and early 2000s, an idea that someone like Bill would totally ascribe to. Bill's computer uses Windows 2000, even though Windows XP would have totally been around in 2003. Just makes sense that Bill wouldn't want to upgrade the OS because that's how they track you. Also, his Guns and Ammo magazine is actually the issue from earlier the year, February 2003. The Fedra evac notice was put in front of the town's Civil War memorial statue of Abraham Lincoln, another example of how all of US history, all of human history, was overshadowed by this apocalyptic event. Bill's bunker includes guns, gun magazines, sulfuric acid, and the like, but as he rises to the ground level, right away, we see a surprisingly stocked wine rack. Just an early sign that Bill has somewhat more cultured taste than you'd expect from a stereotypical survivalist. At the gas station, Bill punches the highest grade of fuel because who cares? Though notice it still only brings up to $1.19 per gallon. Oh my God, 2003. He loots a Home Depot, a scene that feels like the reason Nick Offerman was cast in this role after he played Ron Swanson on Parks and Rec.
Hi there, is there a project you're working on?
I know more than you.
All right.
But while Ron probably would have looted some scotch from the liquor store, Bill loots some Camus Cabernet from Napa Valley. This town has a white church in the background, which in the games is where Bill holes up as his home. But in the show, he stays in the house. This episode gives Bill and Frank a happier relationship, unlike the game, where by the time Joel and Ellie catch up with Bill, Frank is already dead and it was implied they ended on bitter terms. Had the show versions of Bill and Frank follow that path, maybe Bill would have continued to follow his more paranoid tendencies and ended up in the church. 4 years after this, Bill listens to Cream's White Room, which is a song about an empty apartment, because despite Bill building this fortress, his home is still empty. Bill's basement has some banners up: "Don't tread on me," "Join or die." "Join or die" was Benjamin Franklin's political cartoon encouraging the American colonies to unite against the British, which is ironic for a loner like Bill, but exactly the mindset he'll be following by joining with Frank. You can either connect with another human or die alone. Now notice that Bill is actually welding something. This is the modded buzzsaw with a pipe that we later see in action when the raiders attack. The buzzsaw releases the sparks, and then those sparks ignite the gas that blows out the pipe to produce the flamethrower. As Bill goes to check the hole that Frank fell fell into, the control box for the electric fence has been fused to speed limit signs. I just like how Bill has taken everything and repurposed it into something else. But important detail here, notice 4 years after setting up this fence, vines are starting to grow in the barbed wire. Just a few years in, and nature is already starting to make it difficult to maintain security. Bill checks to see if Frank is infected.
How'd you get that?
Yeah, a really good question that this episode doesn't answer. This is a Fedra invention that they wouldn't have invented until at least sometime into the pandemic, meaning Bill would have either had to have killed a Fedra soldier to do this or found it among some dead Fedra soldiers on some raid far beyond Lincoln. I think Bill might have had to kill someone. So Frank is played by Murray Bartlett, who you might know as Armand, the concierge from White Lotus Season 1, and Bill tells him,
"If I feed you, then every bum you talk to about it is gonna show up here looking for a free lunch. And this is not an Arby's."
Well, Arby's didn't have free lunch, it was a restaurant.
I think this hilarious response is the moment that Bill realizes Frank is smart and he at least likes him. Now notice how Frank runs his finger through the dust on Bill's mantle, discovering a purpose for himself here in this home. When Bill enters with the meals, his eyes immediately dart over to that mantle. He's acutely aware of the very first different detail of this room that he's entered every day for the past 3 years, and for the first time in this pandemic, he is feeling self-conscious. Bill serves Frank this amazing meal on fine china. He uses chargers.
A man who knows to pair rabbit with a Beaujolais.
I know I don't seem like the type.
No, you do.
Yes, Frank is letting Bill know that he sees him, and it's okay. So on the piano, Frank plays Linda Ronstadt's Long, Long Time, but he plays too fast, maybe intentionally, to bait Bill into playing it correctly? I don't know. I just love this as a way of showing how Frank moves fast. He is Frank. He gets right to it, whereas Bill wants to take things slow. Both these men are romantics, just moving at different speeds, and fortunately, have been able to find each other here at the end of the world. Now, the speaker of the song is tired of everyone telling them that they'll find love eventually, and they just accept the fate of loving someone who will never love them back and having to live with the wounds of heartbreak. Now, it is 2007 in this scene, but Massachusetts back in September 2003 on Outbreak Day would have been just 2 months before the Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled that the state was required to legalize same-sex marriage, leading Massachusetts to become the first US state to recognize gay marriage in the following May in 2004. So, on Outbreak Day, Bill was right on the cusp of being able to live closer to the way that he wanted to. Long, Long Time is a 1970s song performed by Linda Ronstadt, but the words were written by Gary White, whom Ronstadt saw at a show in 1969. So, going by Frank's radio code, this song was written by a musician in the decade of the 60s, the 60s decade meaning nothing is in, but when the song's words were paired with and immortalized by just the right voice, that of Linda Ronstadt, it became a 70s song, and the 70s decade means new stock. So Linda and Frank were the new stock. We actually learned later this episode that the code was Frank's idea.
Oh, and I had this idea that we should use codes for the radio in case anyone's listening.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Like, I was thinking like the decades, like 80s trouble.
So after they kiss, Frank asks,
"What's your name?"
And it's just so sweet that Frank sheds a tear here, as this is such an emotional catharsis for both these men. Neither of them thought they'd ever have a chance like this. And it's just great that he loves this man so much despite not even knowing his name, because Bill never told him his name. So we jump cut from their sex to... Oh, you! Come on! Yeah, this is the Bill and Frank players of the game expected. As I said, in the game, Frank gets sick of Bill's paranoia and leaves him. He actually tries to leave the town of Lincoln, but he gets swarmed by infected, he gets bitten, and he hangs himself, leaving a suicide note for Bill telling him that he'd rather be dead than spend another day with him. So since they clearly had a lot of bad days in the game, it's good that we get to see at least one bad day here. They're fighting because Frank wants to tidy up the whole neighborhood, so that they're not just surviving, they're actually living.
Paying attention to things. It's how we show love. This is my street too. Just let me love it the way I want to.
Remember, Frank had Bill take a shower before they made love, and Frank will repeat this definition of love to Bill when they're old men.
Do you love me?
Yes.
Then love me the way I want you to.
So they host this wonderful garden party with Joel and Tess, and now you can see that their yard has been mowed and all the surrounding houses have been painted with flags raised. It feels like a regular neighborhood. The two grunters of the pair talk to each other.
I understand. If mine brought strangers into our situation, I wouldn't be happy either.
Yeah, it's so sad. Joel never identified what Tess was to him, but even Bill tracked that because this comes back later. Now, in the game, Tess was the one who kept contact with Bill and Frank. Joel never went to the town, and he didn't even meet Bill until Ellie was with him. Joel notices that the fence needs repairing, and he promises to hook Bill up with some barbed wire.
Last you the rest of your life. lives.
Yeah, a little adjustment from Joel, indicating to Bill that he can see what he and Frank mean to each other, in case Bill was trying to hide it. And as Frank says, paying attention to things is how we show love. When the Raiders attack at night, Frank wakes up to see the battle underway already. Bill didn't want to wake up Frank because he didn't want him to join him in the shootout. One wonders how many nights Bill might have kept watch outside while Frank slept. Bill only gets shot when he turns around to tell Frank to go back inside, and he gets hit in the lower back but bleeds out the front, meaning that was the exit wound and there's no bullet to remove, fortunately. Time jumps ahead again to the end of their lives in 2023. Notice the neighboring houses aren't as nice anymore because both men are older, especially Frank, who would have been the one of the two spending more time to clean everything up, and now he's in the wheelchair. We see Frank's paintings, including one of Joel and his brown jacket. Now remember, Bill and Frank's first meal at the dining table had them at opposite ends of the table, but now they sit right next to each other, an inverse of the famous marriage montage in Citizen Kane, where Kane and his wife sit farther and farther away from each other over time. Also in their bedroom, there's a lovely painting of Bill adorning the wall on his side of the bed, but on the next morning, there's a momentarily scary jump cut to Bill waking up with Frank out of focus in the wheelchair in the background. It reminds us of Ms. Adler back in the first episode. Is Frank infected? Oh god, oh god. But no, it's fine. But this is Frank's biggest fear, to become too old and too frail to stop the Cordyceps from finding his way to him. Frank has terminal cancer now, and so he wants his life to end. And he says,
I'm not going to give you the every day was a wonderful gift from God speech. I've had a lot of bad days. I've had bad days with you, too. But I've had more good days with you than with anyone else.
Yeah, again, I just love this change that we get to see them grow old together. Because it's not like in the game you ever see this couple together, you're just seeing how the relationship ended. But this adaptation invites us to imagine their mixed bag of a life together as half full instead of half empty, which is important. We need reasons to root for humanity's survival on this show. Their final sunset includes a shot of the hole where Bill first found Frank, followed by that strawberry plant from that really happy memory. They exchange wedding rings by the piano where they shared their first kiss, and Bill recreates the first meal he ever cooked for them, grilled rabbit, the same exact label of Beaujolais. He even rotates the plate the same way on the charger as he did before in the very first meal they had. Now we don't see him open the second bottle at the end of the meal, showing how Bill has already drugged it so that he will die too. Bill tells Frank,
"This isn't the tragic suicide at the end of the play. I'm old. I'm satisfied. And you were my purpose."
Now, the tragic suicide at the end of the play is not a Romeo and Juliet reference. Craig Mazin is actually paying homage to Mark Crowley's 1968 play, The Boys in the Band, which has a very similar line. It's meant to dispel the stereotype that all gay love stories have to end in tragic suicides. That play's title is actually a nod to A Star is Born, which of course is another suicide ending. And they got the title from the scene where James Mason tells Judy Garland, "You're singing for yourself and the boys in the band." And as Bill wheels him off to bed, the candles stay lit. When Joel and Ellie arrive a few weeks later, notice how that wax has melted down, meaning those candles continue to burn. The interior lights all remain on as well, because obviously they didn't ever turn them off. Also, dust has collected on the silverware, the house reverting back to its dusty state as it was when Frank first ran his finger along that mantle. Now, Joel tries to get into their bedroom, but the breeze slams the front door shut, distracting him and stopping him from forcing his way in. Some force was keeping Joel from disturbing the grave accidentally, but we later learned that force was Bill having left the window open. That's what caused the air pressure in the house to cause his draft to go through and pull the door shut to keep the grave a sacred place. In his letter, Bill has left Joel with some parting wisdom, and it's read by Ellie.
I used to hate the world, and I was happy when everyone died. But I was wrong, because there was one person worth saving. That's why men like you and me are here. We have a job to do.
Yeah, Ellie stops before reading the end, but Joel grabs the letter, and if you look closely, you can see what he wrote. Use them to keep Tess safe. And if you and she decide you've something, I recommend pairing something. Yeah, he's ending this letter by saying he hopes Joel and Tess could finally confess their love to each other, and Bill left him with a wine pairing option like what he used to woo Frank. It's so sad. Now, we learned that the reason the 80s music played was because it was automatically set to if it wasn't reset in a few weeks, and Ellie finds the gun that Frank kept in his writing desk. I wonder if this is a gun that Bill wasn't even aware of. Ellie wears this red shirt now. This is the same red shirt that Ellie is most often seen wearing in part 1 of the game, and I like how with this and the gun she carries, she is in a way symbolically activated as a sort of playable character, or at least at some point in the future will be playable. Joel has to teach Ellie what a seatbelt is because this is a girl who's blown away by the concept of airplanes. points. So yeah, a working truck must be like a spaceship to her. And Ellie plays a cassette of Linda Ronstadt's Long Long Time, which is how we close the episode, as the camera retreats back through Bill and Frank's open bedroom window from their body's perspective as they watch them go. Now this shot of the open window with the breeze brushing the curtains was actually an intentional nod to the menu screen of the game, the press any button screen. And the producers actually considered opening every episode with an open window, where HBO Max users could press play on a different window every episode to begin it. They ended up scrapping that idea, but we get that concept here, with Frank's painting of Bill on the wall right above some dead flowers. And I just love that we leave Bill and Frank with the window open so their souls are free to go. Had these two men not found each other, they both would have died alone in the darkness underground, like that underground infected that Ellie stabs this episode. Corpses overtaken by the fungus without souls. Frank would have been in the pit, Bill would have been in his bunker, where the only window was, Windows 2000. And so while this series as a whole is a statement of love's destructive power, indeed it did lead Bill to make Frank's suicide a double suicide, there remains an undeniable beauty to that destructive love. And the love that Bill was able to feel for Frank was so powerful that it inspires Joel to save Ellie. This is a breakdown of The Last of Us episode 4, Please Hold My Hand, which proves Ozark right that only the worst people come from Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, I'm not saying it, Prestige TV is. We open on Ellie in the bathroom, aiming the pistol that she got from Frank's drawer at the mirror like she's Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver. This gun is a Beretta 70 series lightweight pistol, which the game developers modeled Ellie's gun on. But she coddles this gun. She's not completely clueless, but she's romanticizing the weapon and not really treating it with the respect that she should. Like Travis Bickle, Ellie is more concerned with her appearance as a hardened killer than the actual weight of that responsibility. Also notice she is in the men's bathroom here. She's fully masculinizing herself. Now, I'm not gonna waste your time with some mirrors are portals high school English bullshit because, you know, not every mirror in every TV show or movie means the same thing. Literary symbols are only important to the context in which they're presented. In this context, it's more interesting to talk about the practical purpose of mirrors, because mirrors are one of many luxuries this world has less of now. Remember, Ellie toyed with the truck's side view mirror to find Joel eyeing her in the reflection last episode, and it's really the mirror and Ellie's reflection in it with the gun that is more of Ellie's fascination than wielding the gun itself. While Ellie also acquired from Bill and Frank her iconic red shirt from the games, the green plaid shirt that Joel changed into after his shower was actually the same shirt Frank wore on the day of his and Bill's argument in episode 3. Joel is siphoning some gas.
Nice. How does that work?
It's a siphon. It's when liquid travels against gravity because pressure.
You don't know.
I know it works.
Another example of Joel not really understanding air pressure. The front door in Bill's house slammed on its own because Bill had left the bedroom window open. But actually, Joel siphoning gas is a nod to Bill in the game, who tosses him a siphon and says that you'd be amazed how many cars still got gas in them. Ellie reads from Will Livingston's No Pun Intended Volume 2, which is one of Ellie's belongings in the games. It's one of the things that you cannot open yourself, but Ellie in cutscenes does read from it. The cover here is the same cover from the game, with the cow saying, "Oh no, not an udder one," and then the duck saying, "These puns quack me up." The one that she reads,
"It doesn't matter how much you push the envelope, it'll still be stationary,"
is actually the first one she reads in the game.
It doesn't matter how much you push the envelope, it'll still be stationary.
What is that?
It's a joke book. No Pun Intended, Volume 2, by Will Livingston.
There's also some pretty precise accuracy to the game with the gay porn magazine that Ellie finds, which is the exact same bearskin cover, same model pose, same text, Men of the Den, college hotties, Ace Von Champ, and Ellie making the same jokes. Now, in the game, when Ellie tosses out the magazine, it lands in front of a Pittsburgh sign, but because this episode takes us beyond Pittsburgh, there is no sign. The cassette tape that Ellie finds that's before Joel's time is in the game Hank Williams' I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive, but here it's Hank Williams' Alone and Forsaken, which is a darker folk song about finding love in the summertime just for that love to leave him by the fall. And the chorus of the song is a prayer. "Oh Lord, if you hear me, please hold to my hand. Oh, please understand." Hold to my hand, the inspiration for this episode's title of Please Hold My Hand. But in this case, the woman who left us here is really the America that we once knew. And the fact that it left us, though, not the worst thing. The amusement park they pass is actually Worlds of Fun near Kansas City, Missouri, and that roller coaster is the Mamba, a ride that opened in 1998. The roller coaster is made of steel, explaining why it would still be intact mostly. They drive past some bison and the westward expansion across the United States with the railroad. In the 19th century, many species of bison were hunted to extinction by passing trained travelers, shooting them for sport. But here, we now see bison herding peacefully by the highway. They also pass an Arby's, recalling Frank's comeback last episode.
And this is not an Arby's.
Well, Arby's didn't have free lunch, it was a restaurant.
Then they pass this collapsed train bridge. This is an actual bridge in Lethbridge, Alberta, and notice how a train stretches across it, a car dangling off. Now, if the world shut down not too long after Outbreak Day, that probably would have been too soon for the bridge to corrode naturally and collapse on its own. So either this train was warmed back up years after Outbreak Day and the bridge then collapsed, or maybe the government bombed this bridge to stop this train from reaching a nearby city. They pull off the road to sleep in the woods with no campfire to avoid being spotted by people, as this series in this episode is adding to the danger of infected, the danger of humanity.
So what are they gonna do, rob us?
Well, they'll have way more in mind than that.
Okay.
Now, Joel tells her this to give a stern warning to not wander, but later as they try to sleep, she brings it up again.
Those people you said. There's no way anyone knows we're here, right? No one's gonna find us.
No one's gonna find us.
So Joel regrets scaring her, and so he stays up all night to keep a lookout with his rifle. He is doing for her what we assume Bill did for many nights for Frank, letting his partner sleep while he keeps watch. That's why the coffee the next morning is so essential for Joel. Ellie crawls over to it, cocooned in Frank's sleeping bag. Episode 2 depicted her in a larval fetal stage as a butterfly flapped over her head, and now she is in the cocoon phase of her metamorphosis. Now, Ellie's roadmap has a red marking for an area east of Pittsburgh, which again is supposed to be the next stop in the game, but here on the show they bypass it.
76 west and then 70 west for like ever.
I-70 does go forever, from western Pennsylvania to Columbus to Indianapolis to St. Louis, then to Kansas City. Joel recaps what happened with Tommy, how Tommy was a joiner who enlisted to fight in Desert Storm, and then after the outbreak formed a crew that moved to Boston and joined up with Tess, and that worked until Tommy met Marlene and then joined the Fireflies, but then quit the Fireflies and moved to Wyoming. Ellie asks,
If you don't think there's hope for the world, why bother going on? I mean, you gotta try, right?
You haven't seen the world, so you don't know. You keep going for family. That's about it.
I'm not family.
No, you're cargo. But I made a promise to Tess, and she was like family.
I think Joel secretly by now sees Ellie as more than cargo, but he doesn't want her treating him like a father yet. Ellie claims she's tired, but we jump cut to her out like a light as they pull up to Kansas City. Now, Pittsburgh to KC is a 13-hour drive, which would be more if they have to stop every hour for gas. I don't know, maybe it's late enough in the year for the days to be really long, and when they arrive to Kansas City, it's late afternoon, but we know this is one day because later Ellie says it's her second day in a car. So Joel must have been flooring it the whole way. Either way, our man is exhausted. The tunnel to Kansas City is blocked by a Sara Lee bread truck. Damn flour, always ruining everything. And one of the cars is a burnt corpse inside. So these drivers might have been torched to prevent potential infected from getting in the city. They get lost in the city.
Is a highway.
I can't tell from this. I'm all turned around.
Well, don't look at the state map. Look at the
I
inset.
don't know where we are in that either.
Since Kansas City is on the border of two states, Missouri and Kansas, Ellie would really need to look at a scaled-in city map, not a state map. Now, they pass a cinema playing Matchstick Men and Underworld, both of which released in the month of September 2003. And yes, that is the Globe Theater of Calgary in Alberta, Canada, where they shot a lot of these outdoor scenes. Now, in an alley is a burnt pile of corpses, and you can actually see their skulls intact, which Joel explained last episode means that these people were killed without being infected, which is bad news. They find the QZ vacated though, and Joel immediately sees it's a trap.
Are we gonna help him?
No.
As we saw in the pilot episode, Joel does not stop for anyone. Later he tells Ellie how he knew it was a trap.
I've been on both sides. It was a long time ago. We did what we needed to survive.
That explains why Joel doesn't pass any moral judgment on these people. He doesn't really take anything personally. They do take things personally, and that's why Joel is able to execute here. He's all business. They crash into a laundromat where they get holed up by gunfire.
They're not gonna hit you. Look at me. They're not gonna hit you.
Yeah, pretty confident words considering everything is exploding around them, but Joel called his shots earlier this episode.
What if you don't find him?
I will.
How do you know?
I'm persistent.
So Joel takes out one of the hunters, which catches the other by surprise.
You mother...
I like that we hear these hunters in the background, but we never cut to them in close-up, reflecting the experience playing the game, where we stay with Joel's point of view and have to listen to all these NPCs cussing you out. The younger hunter gets the drop on Joel. Yeah, and we really get a sense of the rage of these hunters. They aren't NPCs, they're people who are reacting to Joel killing their friends and relatives. And Ellie shoots this kid, but it's not really like the moment from the game where Ellie uses her gun the first time to shoot that guy off Joel when he tries to drown him in the hotel. This is a much more sadder, more human moment. We don't even see the bullet hit. We only know from the kid's bloody hand that she got him in the butt, and he panics.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's over. We're not fighting anymore. I'm gonna go home. I'll tell everyone you're good. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, this isn't a Walking Dead savior who's evil to the bitter end. This is more like Mellish's heartbreaking death in Saving Private Ryan. This kid is begging for his life, and he tells him his name to try to make himself harder to kill, which is one of the first things Frank did when he met Bill.
First, my name's Frank.
I'm Brian. What's your name?
But it doesn't work, and Joel kills Brian, but not with Ellie's Beretta, but with a knife. And actually, learning Brian's name gives us more info later when the other hunters arrive. From here, we cut to a former Fedra prison facility where there are bullet holes and bloodstains on the walls, showing us that this place was taken by force. The hunter's leader is Kathleen Melanie Linsky, a new character created for the HBO series, and she interrogates this doctor.
The Bergquists. No. Mark Anthony Halpin. Carrie Schreiber. Haven't seen them. The Chans. Henry Burrell.
Mark Anthony Halpin is actually a nod to Craig Mazon's friend and a known puzzle master, Mark Halpin. Craig Mazon is a huge hobbyist when it comes to puzzles and things like that. A list of names reminds us of Hans Landa's interrogation at the beginning of Inglourious Bastards, when he lists the names of Jewish families who went into hiding. This is often what happens when a new military force violently takes over and wants to root out all the families they deem disloyal to the new regime. But as Kathleen reads the Federal Rights Board, medical attention, family visit, food and clothing, she reveals these as false promises from an old guard that she suffered under.
I wonder if this is the cell where my brother was beaten to death.
The doctor tries to clean his hands of all these war crimes.
It has to stop.
It has to stop now, you mean?
Now, I know I just compared Kathleen to a Nazi character. She's also similar to a Mossad agent hunting down doctors who work for the Nazis. She wants revenge, all the evil that hurt her loved ones, to never be able to hurt anyone ever again, and that includes guilt by association. So she wants to find Henry, whom she believes ratted on her brother to Fedra, and the doctor won't tell her where Henry is. He thinks she's bluffing.
I'm your doctor.
But the hunters bring back the people Joel wounded and killed, and we see that he stabbed Brian in the chest. An arguably more merciful wound than, I guess, cutting his throat. At least this gets to be an open casket. Kathleen asks,
will he live? What if I had a doctor?
There's no chance. I'm sorry.
And I love this moment. Immediately, we see Kathleen go back and shoot the doctor. She wasn't asking with hope that she might save these wounded. She was asking to make sure she had no further excuse to keep that doctor alive. Kathleen is not thinking about the long-term health of this community. In her mind, they're facing a more short-term threat, and she's more focused on revenge. Kathleen links these hunters' death with Henry, speculating that Henry radioed Joel in, and she uses this to justify sending the hunters out to the homes of every collaborator to kill them. This is a pretty big logical leap, and it's crazy that it works. It just shows how afraid and how nuts these people are. That's the American way, folks. Now notice how their trucks were former Fedra, but the logos have been crossed out since this group overthrew Fedra. These are hunters that we meet in Pittsburgh in the game, and this group is not Fireflies. They actually turned against the Fireflies too after they overthrew Fedra. On the newspaper, Joel peeks out through. There's a headline about Powell, presumably referring to Colin Powell, who was Secretary of State in 2003 and made a lot of headlines for his UN testimony when the US invaded Iraq earlier that year. There's actually another one behind Ellie with the headline, Iraq cost $3.9 billion a month. Huh, you know, the way Bush used 9/11 to invade Iraq is kind of like how Kathleen uses Joel killing a few hunters to wipe out all the political enemies in Kansas City, despite these two things actually being unrelated. It's human nature, folks. Joel struggles to debrief with Ellie after the situation with Brian.
I know what it's like. First time that you hurt someone like that. If you, I'm not good at this.
Yeah, you really aren't.
Joel apologizes, saying that Ellie shouldn't have had to shoot him. Ellie cries, but she reveals why.
It wasn't my first time.
Yeah, Ellie isn't crying over shooting Brian, she's crying over some past person that she hurt. Joel teaches Ellie how to hold the gun with two hands, thumbs interlocked, which makes it harder for her to drop the gun when it recoils or if someone were to try to grab it. Now, Kathleen's lieutenant is Perry, played by Jeffrey Pierce, who plays Tommy in the games. Jeffrey Pierce actually said in the Behind the Episode featurette that Perry has a past in the military, making me wonder if he was a former Fedra soldier who turned on the rest of Fedra and helped Kathleen overthrow them. Maybe he was a witness to Kathleen's brother getting beaten to death. He takes her to Henry and Sam's hideout with Sam's drawings of a superhero on the walls. Both Henry and Sam are actually drawn as superheroes. And notice, as Kathleen first enters this attic, one of the superhero's foes is a Fedra soldier in blue uniform and riot gear. So really, Henry and Sam's enemies are the same as Kathleen's enemies. Perry then shows her this caved-in room with a floor that pulsates from beneath, presumably some infected below. I'm gonna talk more about what's going on here in Spoiler Corner. After climbing 33 floors, Joel spreads some broken glass.
I don't want someone sneaking up on us while we're sleeping.
Oh, I get it. Crunch, crunch, crunch.
You sure you're gonna hear it?
Of course I'll hear it. That's the damn point.
Again, this has all been one day. Joel got no sleep the night before because he was guarding Ellie. He then drove 13 hours, then they crashed, then he had to shoot 2 guys, and then he was nearly strangled, then he stabbed that kid, and then he climbed 33 flights. Our man is 56 years old. A bomb could go off and it wouldn't wake him up after this exhausting day. But Joel asked Ellie about the first time she hurt someone, and Ellie, for the first time, doesn't want to talk about something. Ellie then deflects, saying Joel doesn't hear too well out of his right ear. But that's also the side that was facing her in the truck during their drive. He might have just been ignoring her, but Joel doesn't deny it. He attributes it to years of shooting on that side. And Ellie's diarrhea pun relaxes Joel enough so that he can fall asleep. And he is now turned toward Ellie with his watch facing out, his father-daughter connection returning. But Henry and Sam have found them. Sam perched on Joel with a superhero mask painted on his face. And we end the episode with a gun in our face, reminding us of Ellie back in the first scene pointed a gun at the mirror. But in this instance, Sam correctly has both hands on the gun, signaling to Joel that this kid doesn't need him to teach him how to kill. Okay, on to spoiler corner. Let's talk about that cave-in. This likely was above the sewer, which in the Pittsburgh section of the game that these episodes are relocating from is where a group of survivors try to make home, but then they all get infected. But since the Bill part of the game is where you meet your first bloater, and we didn't see a bloater in episode 3, I am guessing the trailer shot of the bloater rising up from a hole in the ground might be coming next episode, and a bloater might be among the sewer runners and clickers that are going to be crawling up through this building. But also remember, this series is suggesting that the fungus's fibers grow deep beneath the ground and snake through the soil and are all connected by a network based off of the world's biggest organism being in Eastern Oregon, a single fungus that spans like 4 square miles. So I think the fibers of this fungus may have helped tunnel beneath this ground to free the infected underneath. It's one big patch of cordyceps all working together to release more of these drones. We'll get to know Sam and Henry next episode, so there's no need to say too much about them other than the show is really connecting them more to these hunters, that there's some history between Henry and Kathleen, whereas in the game, Henry and Sam arrive to Pittsburgh after coming from Hartford and don't really have that much of a history with the hunters. And of course, the question, who did Ellie hurt? Well, Joel and Ellie's chat wasn't about shooting someone, it's about hurting someone. So maybe Ellie might just be alluding to some survivor skill over Riley getting infected. We know Riley's undermined. The Mortal Kombat 2 game, that was a reference to Left Behind when Riley told Ellie about an arcade game. And of course, this joke book was a joke book given to her by Riley. And this is a breakdown of The Last of Us Episode 5, Endure and Survive. So we open in Kansas City on the night Kathleen's revolutionary movement overthrew Fedra, and we are thrust into the horrific violence that insurrections tend to be. The opening shot is a single red flare fired into the night sky like celebratory fireworks, but a flare is really designed to be an SOS signal. A beacon, as in these revolutionaries are morally lost, their souls beyond saving. The flare in its smoke trail also reminds me of a fungal stalk, which my interview with a cordyceps expert said in some cases can shoot upward with the speed of a gun. The Pilobolus fungus considered one of the fastest organisms on Earth. So think about that in context of how fast the clickers and bloater in this regime later this episode. The crowd chants freedom and you, Fedra. And last breakdown, I compared Kathleen to America after 9/11, the Nazis making lists of names over their takeover of Europe, the Israelis getting revenge on Nazi doctors, and really what we're seeing here is January 6th if it wasn't stopped. Whenever throughout history and wherever throughout the world, revenge-fueled violence is humanity at its scariest. Insurrectionists are laughing as they slaughter Fedra soldiers, stripping them down, hanging them, dragging their impaled bodies through the streets. They announce, as we see later with Kathleen, the trial is not at all fair, and it's interesting that they code the Fedra loyalists as collaborators. Collaboration normally having a positive connotation for community building, but in this short-sighted movement's lexicon, a form of evil. Melanie Linsky plays Kathleen with an eerie suburban calmness, as opposed to the gruff energy female revolutionaries sometimes have in media.
Well, I'm not Fedra. Lucky for you. No one here has to die. Yeah, we could put you on trial. You're all guilty, so that's how that'll go. And you'll do some time, easy.
Yikes, the way she has already made up her mind. Actually, Melanie Linsky had an amazing Twitter thread explaining how Kathleen is not the coolest or the toughest person, she's the organizer, the planner, multitasker. And for better or worse, this group listened to the person with the best ideas of how to get shit done. Now, one prisoner gives up Dr. Edelstein, who is helping Henry hide.
Hold up, where?
He didn't say. I swear, I've told you everything I know.
Of course you have. You're a rat.
Oh, rat. Another nod to Hans Landa, who in the Inglourious Bastards opening scene likened himself to a hawk and Jewish people to rats, giving his take on the Nazi propaganda that did as much. Kathleen's Lieutenant Perry is played by Jeffrey Pierce, who voiced Joel's brother Tommy in the game. Perry doesn't want to devote all the men to hunting Henry.
Door to door take a lot of men, and there are other things that probably...
He's not my 7th priority, Perry. Is that what he is to you?
Kathleen is so blinded by revenge, and she has no real plan to maintain stability in KC, a blindness that will do all of them in this episode. Henry and Sam in the game are brothers Joel and Ellie meet in Pittsburgh. They're originally from Hartford, but here the show gives them more of a backstory in KC and a connection to Kathleen and her brother Michael. They meet Dr. Edelstein in the hideaway that Perry and Kathleen will find, seen last episode.
Is he scared?
Yeah. Well, he saw a lot. Nothing I can do about that now.
He's scared because you're scared.
Good advice from this doctor. Kids often don't have context of the chaos of the world, and they look to their guardians for how to emotionally respond. If the parent panics, the kid will panic. And I love that in the panic of their escape, Henry knew to pack Sam's bag of crayons among the other essentials. That giving this kid something to focus on is as important as food and other supplies. This gives Sam the opportunity to cover the surfaces with art that reframes the outside world as a positive place. Kind of like the mother and son characters in the movie and book Room, where they transformed their prison into the boundaries of the entire world. And hey, by the way, I am wearing our Last of Us inspired shirt that you can get from our merch partners at nerdriot.shop. Getting these is one great way to help support this channel. Okay, 10 days later tells us that in the time span from Revolution Night to Joel and Ellie's arrival in Kansas City and that suburb outbreak is only a week and a half. That is how long Kathleen's regime lasted. Sam's drawings show Super Sam fighting Fedra soldiers. So Sam had the same enemy that Kathleen had. He doesn't fully understand that Henry sold out Kathleen's brother Michael to Fedra, and now that's why Kathleen is hunting them. And notice how by this time, Sam is now painting an orange border around Super Sam, showing how he recognizes he and Henry are boxed in. The next day, Henry says they're out of food, and Sam asks if they killed Dr. Edelstein. Henry says probably yes. Remembering Edelstein's advice, Henry keeps Sam feeling confident by painting an orange superhero mask on his face, which also gives Henry some confidence when he looks down at his brother. As they leave, we realize this is the same moment Joel and Ellie are crashing through. And I love the point of view work across these two episodes. Last episode, from Ellie's point of view, we didn't see Joel shoot that second hunter, and now we do see that from Henry's point of view. And now when Joel looks over in his direction, Henry ducks. Last episode, you can see that same white door across the street with the 5 boxed windows that Henry was looking out of, but at that point we didn't know Henry was there. Henry gives Sam one of 2 unloaded guns that he and Edelstein pointed at each other. So if you think Edelstein left them with that gun, had Edelstein kept that gun, he might have been able to escape from the revolutionaries, or at least to pull them. But when Henry gives his brother the gun, it mirrors what Joel did with Ellie. And he tells Sam to hold it firm, but he doesn't tell him to use 2 hands. That's something that Sam does on his own, which makes Joel less likely to try anything. I love how Joel refuses to warm his tone.
That's right.
It's a weird tone, man.
That's just the way he sounds. He has an asshole voice. Joe, tell him he's okay.
Everything is great.
Dude.
Yeah, if you think about it, Joel is intentionally staying cold for that line, everything's great, just to psych out Henry. The next morning, Henry gives Joel a view of the city.
Welcome to Killer City.
No, Fedra.
Not as of 10 days ago, no.
You always heard Casey Fedra was...
Monsters, savages. Yeah, you heard right. Raped and tortured and murdered people for 20 years. Hey, you know what happens when you do that to people? The moment they get a chance, they do it right back to you.
Yeah, Killer City is a nickname given to KC, popularized by rapper Fat Tone's track Killer City, which did come out after 2003, but probably would have been a nickname locals used before then. The fact that Joel had heard of the KC Fedra's reputation tells us how horrible of a life Kathleen and those revolutionaries must have lived under to get them to that point. Henry says,
Never killed anyone, and pointing an unloaded gun at you is the closest I've ever come to being violent.
Yeah, Henry's making a major admission here that their guns were not loaded. So Joel isn't really pissed. He recognizes here that Henry can be trusted. Henry draws them a map and explains how to cross the highway by throwing to Sam, who writes tunnels on his Woody Woodpecker doodle pad. And I love this detail because 1, it establishes this as how Sam communicates, and 2, demonstrates the tunnel route as one a kid like Sam is not afraid of, so Joel and Ellie are more likely to see it as safe. Henry says that Fedra drove all the infected underground 15 years prior and claims that they cleared it out 3 years ago, and admits that in the meantime a few more might have gone down there.
Or one of those blind ones that sees like a bat.
You ran into a clicker.
2 of them.
And you're still alive.
Yeah, I think this is the first time the show has used the term clicker from the game, which also signals to gamers that they are going to be following the infected progression from the game, which includes next stage bloaters. That plus the fact that he said it was 15 years since the infected were bottled up underground tells us that that's plenty of time for one of them to bloat. As they navigate the tunnels, I love how Joel sounds like a gamer who has died playing The Last of Us several times.
See? It's empty. The plan is good.
The plan is good. We've been down here 2 seconds. We don't know anything.
Dad's kind of a pessimist.
I'm not my dad.
Yes, both Ellie and Joel are on the same page that Joel, for now, sees Ellie as cargo still. They reach its entrance that's painted to look like a happy kingdom, which looks exactly like the entrance to the underground Pittsburgh area where Danny and Ish live. And inside, they find a kid's drawing of Danny and Ish, our protectors, just like the one you find in the game. So Ish was a fisherman who had been out to sea for several months during the outbreak and returned ashore near a Pittsburgh sewer entrance. And there, he established a community with another guy named Danny and Susan and Kyle and their kids and several others, but at some point a door was left open and Ish and Susan and the kids escaped and made it out to the suburbs. After that, their fate is unknown. We see that hinted at by the rules here, and Joel hints at that.
What happened to them?
Maybe they didn't follow the rules and they all got infected.
Actually, Ish's name was a nod to Isherman Ish Williams in George R. Stewart's 1949 post-apocalyptic novel Earth Abides, in which this guy, Ish, leads a similar community of pandemic survivors. Now here in Kansas City, Ish probably would not have been a fisherman who was out to sea, but now the uniforms make a bit more sense. Make me think that Ish and Danny might have been Fedra soldiers, in the show at least, who broke away from the more awful rest of Kansas City Fedra. Sam and Ellie find a Savage Starlight comic. This is an in-universe comic series in the game, following Dr. Daniela Starr, space adventurer in 2186. This episode's title, Endure and Survive, comes from the trophy that you get in the games if you collect all these comics, which is why Ellie is so stoked to talk about her collection.
I have issues 4, 5, 6, 11.
Issue 11 you can find upon leaving Pittsburgh in the game after escaping the hunters and washing ashore on the beach. It's in the wrecked boat. But she says she has issue 5, and issue 5 in the game isn't found until way later in Tommy's Dam. This issue is Accretion. You see the title at the bottom there. That is issue 6, in which Daniela and Captain Ryan are thrown into an arena where the hostile extraterrestrials, the Travelers, make them fight to the death. I guess you could say there's a parallel in the way that Ellie and Sam are thrown into a death arena. As Ellie and Sam recite the Endure and Survive creed from the comics, behind them on the wall, the Pats kids drew stick figures of an older girl and a younger boy that parallel Ellie and Sam in this moment. Joel apologized for assuming Henry was untrustworthy.
All things considered, seems kind of cruel to send a whole army after you for that.
But Henry doesn't let Joel let him off the hook. He's still punishing himself for betraying Michael in order to get leukemia medication for Sam from Fedra.
There was a man, a great man. He's never afraid, never selfish, and he's always forgiving. Have you ever met someone like that? Kind of man you'd follow anywhere.
Melanie Linsky said in an interview that Kathleen's brother was considered a Jesus figure, and so that metaphor would make Henry the Judas Iscariot, who was the apostle who turned in Jesus and in the New Testament committed suicide.
I am the bad guy because I did a bad guy thing, but you get it though. You might not be her father, but you were someone's.
We learned last episode that Joel has been both a black hat and a white hat, that he previously faked being injured to lure people into a trap, but it's worth noting that Joel did not do these bad things to protect Sarah. Sarah was gone at that point. He didn't even have protecting a kid as an excuse. Perry finds Kathleen in Michael's childhood room where a soccer photo is still on the wall, and she says,
"When Michael and I were little, this room seemed so big. I was really scared of thunder. So when there was a storm, Michael told me that this wasn't a room at all. That this was actually just a big wooden box. He said, as long as we were together in our perfect box, we would be safe."
Pretty sad for Kathleen to feel this way, even after seeing Sam and Henry's hideout last episode and realized that Henry had been doing the same exact thing for Sam to protect him. But that is the point. Michael's death proved to Kathleen that his forgiveness, his turn the other cheek mindset, did not help him survive this backwards world. So here, by agreeing that they're doing the right thing, both she and Perry are sealing their moral fates. The others make it to the suburbs across the highway, but a sniper starts firing on them. Henry tries to run away with Sam.
Let's go. What are you doing? Get the f out of here! Oh shit!
Yeah, notice how Henry reacts to the gunshot. Sam doesn't. He just reacts to Henry. Tells us how confusing this all must be for this deaf kid. Joel sneaks up behind the shooter and begs him not to make him kill him.
Please don't do it. Please.
Yeah, interesting again how we cut away from Joel killing someone. The second hunter that Joel shot last episode, that guy Brian who he stabbed, were both off screen. Those were only experienced from Ellie's point of view, just like this killing is here. Only Joel's pummeling of that Fedra soldier in episode 1 do we see because Ellie sees it. Joel's violence is only depicted when it has a role in activating Ellie's violence. Joel screams, "Run!" which at first the kids don't hear because it's too far away until it's too late and the plow is barreling through the cars. It too has "Run" spray painted on it. The tension is so nerve-wracking, especially when the rifle jams. And immediately after it jams, we cut back to the word "run" on the plow, as if it is Joel's mental scream to Ellie. But that jam provides a pause for Joel to collect his breath and re-aim, so the next shot he fires takes out the plow driver. Henry asks Kathleen to at least let the kids go, but Kathleen refuses to accept Henry's argument that doing anything to save a kid is worth it.
But did you ever stop to think that maybe he was supposed to die? Well, kids die, Henry. They die all the time. You think the whole world revolves around him? That he's worth everything?
During this morally bankrupt line, which Melanie Lynskey delivers perfectly without an ounce of remorse, we cut to Joel, who is doing the same thing for Ellie. Their entire relationship with Henry and Sam is designed to force Joel to think about his relationship with Ellie. Kathleen believes she is the one delivering Henry's rightful fate.
It ends the way it ends.
But Kathleen fails to see her own rightful fate. Warned to her last episode with that pulsing hellmouth back in the city, that Fedra didn't really clear all the infected, they just moved them. The burning plow truck has damaged the basement of this house, and that heavy-ass truck caves a hole into the sewers below, and... I love how fast those infected geyser up out of the hole all at once. From Joel's high angle, you can see one of them running in his direction, still on fire. Much like the experience you would have playing some parts of the game, Joel is stuck on one perch, having to shoot infected to keep Ellie safe in another area. The editing makes it seem like he and Ellie are starting to share a hive mind, like all the pieces of the fungus do. He sees Ellie looking at an open vehicle window and his eyes dart over to it. He's just somehow able to know where she needs to go and clears a path for her. And then we see it. The bloater rises up from the pit. So bloaters are the stage of infected after clickers, in which the fungus continues to build on the body over 10 years, forming a kind of armor resistant to gunfire. And I love that the show designers kept his sagging belly, like bloaters have in the game, though bloaters in the game aren't this tall. They don't seem strong enough to lift people in the air like this, but they can totally rip your jaw apart and smash your skull. Perry gets his attention, and as Kathleen flees, we see it ripping Perry's head off. It is wild. And I do love that, as is sometimes the case in the game, the bloater is not taken down. The last time we see that swarming street, the bloater is still walking around. Joel is so shaken by seeing this bloater that he loses sight of the one clicker small enough to fit in that vehicle window, a young girl. This clicker is actually played by young actress Skye Bell Cowton, who is an accomplished gymnast. Ellie is able to evade her, but when Kathleen catches them, it is that same girl clicker who gets her. Bit of irony considering Kathleen previously considered kids' lives unimportant. In the motel afterwards, while Ellie reads the comic to him, Sam looks uninterested because he knows he has been infected at this point. He writes, "If you turn into a monster, is it still you inside?" A similar fear that Ellie had when she previously asked Joel about this, and then was able to investigate when she sliced open that infected in the convenience store basement. But on a deeper level, this is also a thematic question. If you start to act monstrously, are you the same human you once were? Does our monstrosity come from some natural external evil separate from us? Or do we innately invite the monstrosity to take us over by some force of destiny, maybe natural selection, as a result of our natural affinity for monstrosity that was always inside us so that we reconnect with nature? This is the sort of question posed by Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, even with Robert Kirkman's decision to title it The Walking Dead, The Walking Dead referring to the human survivors of that story. Ultimately, it's human vanity to consider our souls exceptional, above nature, and these monsters are nature's way of rebalancing the status quo. We are the monsters. We are legend. And that was always us inside. It just, really sucks to see this happen to a kid. Ellie cuts her hand hoping her blood will cure him, but it does not work that way. And Ellie awakens to see Sam sitting facing the sun, maybe reacting to the sunlight, the same way the infected in episode 2 turned in the sun. Henry grabs a gun. At first seems like he's gonna shoot Joel, but then instinctively shoots Sam. And then, flooded with despair, that Kathleen might have been right, that maybe it wasn't all worth it, he makes a decision to end it. This is mostly how it goes down in the game. And I think it might have been just too much to change Henry and Sam's fate, because the truth is, yeah, this is a bleak world. And Joel, for his future path, needs to be conflicted with the possibility that putting everything on the line for a kid might not be worth it. Looking back, giving Bill and Frank a happy ending in episode 3 was desperately needed for this HBO series, because otherwise it would have been one bleak suicide after another. Ellie leaves Sam's notepad on its grave with "I'm sorry" written on it. And I think what's even sadder for me, the way she wrapped the string around the top and tucks it in so that no one else will ever be able to write anything else. Joel was wrong that it's easier for kids because no one is depending on them, because kids can sometimes feel that responsibility too, as Ellie did as a big sister to Sam. By trying to give her blood to Sam, she really thought that she might cure him, and by asking which way is west, she's not burying her grief. She is furious with herself and desperate to find a doctor who could turn her blood into a cure to prevent this shit from happening ever again. And Joel and Henry were also wrong that endure and survive was redundant and didn't make sense. It does make sense. The two words are different things. To survive is to just stave off death, but to endure is to emotionally harden oneself and to tolerate the pain of survival. And as these two characters walk this path, they must both endure and survive. This is a breakdown of The Last of Us episode 6, Kin, in which brothers reunite and teach each other what communism is. Whatever commie mountain life Tommy's been living, if he was a Desert Storm vet, at least 18 years old in 1991 and it's 2023 now, he looks pretty damn good for post-apocalyptic 50. Okay, we begin back in the chilling moment in KC from episode 5 when Henry shoots Sam and decides to take his own life. One detail I didn't mention is how, after painting that orange Super Sam eye mask on his brother, as Henry looked out the window at Joel and Ellie, the reflection casts an orange stripe over his eyes too. The fact that he could not save his brother leaves Joel with a grim fear that he too could fail as a caretaker, which is why he begs for Tommy to take Ellie. It is really the core emotional through line of this episode. We jump ahead 3 months later to a cabin in the Wyoming wilderness, the home of Marlon and his wife Florence, original characters for this series. We see a stack of firewood, a hunted buck's antlers scraping the snow, and we're reminded of Bill's home in Lincoln, the firewood that he chopped and the hunted game that he suspended and dressed in his shed. Marlon has bow hunted a few white rabbits and comes in just seeing the look on Florence's face, knowing that intruders are in the house. And I just love Graham Greene's happy now smile when he pulls the gun out. He's such a good actor who's shown up in a ton of titles like Dances with Wolves. I love this actor. Now Ellie refuses to stay hidden upstairs and Joel demands that they point on the map where they are.
And your answer better be the same as your wife's.
You telling the truth?
Yeah.
Are you telling me the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that Marlon still can never really tell what games his wife might be playing. Marlon asks about the town of Cody, where Joel was previously headed.
You seen Cody?
Yeah, I got close enough. It's crawling with infected.
Yeah, Laramie and Wind River Reservation?
Yeah, Wind River Reservation is in Wyoming, and it's a setting and name of a Wyoming region where Taylor Sheridan's 2017 film Wind River takes place, in which Graham Greene co-stars alongside Elizabeth Olsen and Jeremy Renner. It's an amazing film, check it out. Outside, Ellie takes one of the 2 rabbits that Marlon caught, the smaller one, and Joel tells her to leave it. But it's this moment that seems to send Joel into his panic attack. Why is that? Well, I believe the 2 rabbits represent the 2 daughter figures in Joel's life, Sarah and Ellie. White fur representing innocence. The color white he now sees all around him the further and further west he goes. His paternal empathy is starting to merge these 2 young women. Ellie taking the smaller one triggers him to think about the older daughter that he left behind. Meanwhile, Joel is the hanging deer, bleeding out in the snow, the way he ends this episode.
Holy shit, are you dying?
Okay, I'm okay. I'm fine.
No, but are you? Because just a reminder that you're dead, I'm
fine.
I love how Ellie stumbles on the line.
It's gonna be easy. All we have to do is cross the river of death.
In Greek mythology, the River of Death is the river Styx, which all souls must travel to reach the underworld. This episode is marking the break into the 3rd act of the season, where Joel and Ellie are crossing over into the darkest parts of their journey. Gustavo Santaolala's guitar strings score their walk across the landscape, a rare instance of us hearing it within the runtime of an episode. By the campfire, Joel tapes his boot, reminding us of Tess back in episode 2, and Ellie sees the northern lights.
Aurora Borealis. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country.
As she tells Joel later in this scene, her dream is to be an astronaut like Sally Ride. And I totally agree with Ellie. Sally Ride, an amazing astronaut name. Now again, it has been 3 months, but only now does Ellie reveal.
I tried with Sam.
Tried what?
I knew he was infected. I rubbed some of my blood into his bite. I know, it was stupid. I wanted to save him.
Well, I reckon it's a lot more complicated than that.
And not to bum us out too much by focusing on last week, but it is worth noting that even after his infection took over, Sam still sat facing away from Ellie and he was unable to hear her still. Even though, as we saw with Ms. Adler in episode 1 and confirmed by the producers, Cordyceps fixes your physical ailments. And Neil Druckmann and Craig Mason even said that what Sam worried, that when you become the monster, it might still be you inside, might be the case for Sam in that moment. Joel sends her off to bed.
Dream of sheep ranches on the moon.
Yeah, I love that Joel combines their separate dreams into a mutual shared dream. And we match cut from this nighttime campfire to the morning, and Joel mumbles in his sleep. Yeah, Joel is saying supposed to be me. He's feeling survivor's guilt and inadequacy, that he was never supposed to walk this path. He should be dead. And falling asleep proves Joel's fear right.
I'm responsible for you, okay?
Then don't fall asleep.
This is an inverse of Joel and Ellie from episode 4, when Joel was able to let Ellie sleep while he kept watch at night, and then later in that episode, Ellie still fell asleep immediately on the drive. As Joel and Ellie cross what they think is the River of Death, I love the little detail of the snow clumped up on their backpacks, something that the costumer, the set decorator probably would have added to the actors to make sure they look like they've been outside for a while. And speaking of the great outdoorsy costuming of the show, I am wearing this awesome warm canvas jacket given to us by our friends at Huckberry. You can get one of your own by clicking the link in the description. Okay, so they arrive at this hydroelectric dam.
Damn.
You're no Will Livingston.
So that made electricity?
Yeah, don't ask me, I don't have a clue.
Will Livingston, of course, the author of No Pun Intended. And remember, after Ellie asks Joel how gas siphoning works, he has learned to not even begin trying. Now, this dam is actually the location of the Jackson events of part 1 of the game. And here we see residents are in the process of getting the generator operational. The HBO series jumps past that, showing us the full town to give Joel and Ellie a glimpse of a comfortable, safe home life that they could have. And really, a constructive life that Tommy has made for himself after he left his brother. But the cavalry uses this dog to sniff the cordyceps on them. Remember back in episode 1, the Adler dog Mercy sensed the infection on Mrs. Adler, so we know dogs can detect this, and Joel freezes as he goes into another panic attack. So why doesn't the dog smell the cordyceps in Ellie's arm? Well, it might be that dogs can only smell cordyceps if it has spread throughout the body and taken over the brain stem. But either way, Ellie is a new form of human adaptation to the fungus, and dogs in their immortal, divine character judgment ability just love humans who won't ever turn on them. Now, we see the town of Jackson and it is thriving. There's the Tipsy Bison Bar from the games, the banners for the Jackson Lights Festival 2003. You'd think they would have taken them down by now, but maybe they're just nostalgic. Ellie passes a woman in a wheelchair and kids making snowmen, showing how this community is stable enough to care for children and the elderly. Joel and Tommy reunite. It's a bit different from the games where there's a bit more hesitancy between the brothers when they first see each other. But notice Ellie's expression. It's mixed and jealous. She senses that she is now a bit less important in Joel's life. She wishes she had that immediate family connection. Ellie's making friends.
What?
What's wrong with you?
What about her manners?
She was just curious. Kids around here don't usually look or talk like you.
Well, maybe I'll teach them.
Now, this girl isn't named here, but she could end up being someone important in the future of the series. I'm gonna get to that more in spoiler corner at the end of the video. Tommy reveals that he and Maria are together.
Oh shit. Congrats. Joel, say congrats.
Congrats.
Yeah, I love that same forced friendliness that Joel just mutters out through his gritted teeth. The same that he used on Henry last episode.
Everything is great.
Dude.
So we get a full tour of Jackson.
House of worship, multi-faith, school, laundry. Oh, bank works as the jail, not that we've needed it.
Yeah, they don't need the bank anymore because there's no capital in this commune, but it sounds like they also don't need the jail, either because people don't break the law or they get shot if they do, or maybe both. Tommy says,
all shared, collective ownership.
So, communism.
Nah, it ain't like that.
It is that, literally. This is the commune. We're communists.
Yeah, it's funny how in the 7 years that he's been here, Tommy really never made the connection, just showing how a lot of people don't really understand what communism actually is. Ellie meets the pony named Shimmer. That is the name of a horse in part 2 of the game. Joel tells Tommy,
doesn't seem like you age much.
You, on the other hand.
Okay, so Gabriel Luna is 40 years old, probably around 39 when he shot this. Pedro Pascal is 47, probably around 46 when he shot this. So Tommy should be at least 50 if he served in the Gulf War. Joel is a few years older than that, so I love that they at least acknowledge how young these actors look, even though they gray up Pedro Pascal a bit. Tommy asks,
so how's Tess?
She's fine.
Good then. And the kid?
She's the daughter of some Firefly muckety-muck.
Yeah, Joel has to lie about Tess initially because if he reveals how she died, he'll have to reveal everything about Ellie. But as a side effect of this, because he tells Tommy that he's moving to Ellie for a payment, Tommy continues to see his brother as a morally corrupt person who hasn't moved on from that life of killing people to get by. Tommy doesn't want to take Joel to Eastern Colorado University because he's gonna be a father.
I feel like I'd be a good dad. Guess we'll find out.
I guess we'll find out. That's all you got?
What else am I supposed to say?
Yes, the whole idea of fatherhood still stings for Joel. He once considered himself a good dad, but now he sees the whole idea of fatherhood as just setting one up for failure. And Joel has another panic attack, but notice how Pedro Pascal is blinking rapidly at first, but then he stops and goes wide-eyed when he looks over to see a woman who from behind looks exactly like Sarah. But it turns out she is a mom who hugs her daughter, a daughter who looks like an even younger Sarah. Since it is 20 years since Sarah's death, Sarah would have been old enough to be a mom, and Joel could have been a grandfather. He's seen the entire entire erased timeline of his family tree. Ellie showers in this teenage girl's room where a bunch of teenage stuff is pinned on the corkboard, ranking the 10 hottest boys. Number 1, Freddie Thompson. Number 2, Taylor Marks. Number 3, Benny Neufeld. Number 4, Chad Wilson. Number 5, Ben Monty writes hotter with a haircut, so he was arrowed to number 1. Also in the lower left, we see a photo of Ben, I assume that's pre-haircut, where he wrote, "Stay cool, never change." Number 6, Scotty R, with an arrow pointing to a beach photo. By the way, sorry, other Scotty in Jackson, Wyoming, 2003. You didn't make the list, buddy. Number 7, Ricky Barney. Number 8, Marshall Martins, arrow pointing to Marshall on a stage. Tammy's fave, she called dibs. I like how she wrote the plural version of Tammy's. I-E-S, not Y''S. But whoever this girl is, grammatical and spelling errors everywhere. Number 9, Dawson P, then crossed out not. Yikes, what happened to you, Dawson? Number 10, Hunter Phelps, and then an asterisk, Professor Smeds, Rolo's fave. Also, how old was this girl? Do you call your high school teachers professor? There's also a note from a secret admirer, and then some emo song lyrics. No one can hear me when I tell them I'm sad and I can't go on. And then the chorus, nobody but me will ever rise up the bullies. And later in this room, we see this girl has a poster for Radiohead's Creep and an iMac desktop from the early aughts. Maria left out for Ellie a Diva Cup, a very practical thing considering how glad Ellie was to find tampons 3 months ago. Since the subject is hardly ever covered in post-apocalyptic fiction, I do just like how menstruation is a reality for these characters. Ellie finds the names Kevin and Sarah written on the chalkboard, candles in front of each of them. Kevin was Maria's son, born April 3rd, 2000, and died a few days after Outbreak Day, meaning he was 3 years old with his mother Maria, a story that I really just don't want to see ever. Please, Last of Us, don't show us that. And of course, Sarah, that was Joel's daughter, Tommy's niece, died at age 14 the night after Outbreak Day. Outbreak Day was the 26th, and this was after midnight when she died. Maria reveals that Sarah was Joel's daughter, and they argue about Joel's character.
There's a whole lot you're not telling me. Good. The only people who can betray us are the ones we trust.
I like that we have this scene because in the game, we never really cut away from Joel's point of view. So now we get to see how Ellie found out. And it was a result of this nice casual moment between women, where one is cutting the other one split ends. Just two women looking out for each other. Now this town screens the 1977 film The Goodbye Girl, written by Neil Simon. This was the first rom-com to gross over $100 million. Richard Dreyfuss won Best Actor for playing Elliot, who's an actor who moves in with a woman, Paula. The two form a friendship, and it's really sweet. He promises to never leave them, but he gets a huge job offer that he can't turn down. He has to make a big decision. Of course, parallel to Joel's dilemma in this episode, a man who gets stuck with a girl and has to decide if he's actually up to be her caretaker. And I love how they are screening this in the same mess hall where Joel and Ellie ate earlier. Everything is multi-purpose. Joel tells Tommy that Ellie is immune and emotionally confesses how inadequate he feels to take care of her and how his dreams are making him feel.
I just know that when I wake up, I've lost something. I'm failing in my sleep. It's all I do. It's all I've ever done is fail again.
Now we get to this big moment where Ellie is reading the girl's diary in the room, but we actually see a close-up of the diary page here. And you can read, "I hate my family. Mom told me she would take me to the mall. Something about me and my big mouth." And then she writes, "Geez, I'm crying on the page." Geez, spelled geese. And then Holly's stepmom has left my dad. I feel so bad. It's all very true and typical teenage girl emotions that Ellie can't at all relate with.
It's bizarre.
Now, all of this is almost a line-for-line adaptation from the amazing scene in the game where Joel finds Ellie and they have this heartbreaking argument. Except in the game, it comes after Ellie runs away on a horse to a nearby ranch house and Joel has to chase her down. I think it's great that they kept most of the dialogue the same. Even the wallpaper of the room is exactly the same.
You have no idea what loss is. You have no idea what loss is.
Now, there is no "you're on mighty thin ice" line, but the big difference I've noticed is that in the game, they're interrupted by Tommy running in and you gotta fight some raiders. Here, it just ends on this heavy emotional beat, which forces us to stay in the headspace of the characters. Now, in this room behind Joel on the wall is a poster of a giraffe. Around this section of the game, Joel and Ellie do find giraffes. Joel envisions decorating a Christmas tree with Sarah. His wristwatch is still working, unbroken. So was this before Sarah died? Well, probably not, because it sounded like his watch hadn't worked in years. So this must have been a fantasy in which Sarah survived until 3 months after Outbreak Day through Christmas 2003. And then from this moment, Joel's mind then drifts to Sarah, age 14, from the morning they ate their final meal from his point of view, as he sat across from her at that kitchen table and she wore that same lavender shirt. So Joel decides to give Ellie the choice on whether she wants him as her guardian, and she says yes. They attempt some target practice with Tommy's rifle and his new scope that he mentioned before. Joel proves Ellie wrong by firing a hole right in the H of asshole. Joel explains what a contractor was, what people's politics used to be, and he explains football and turnovers, first downs, and Ellie just sums it up.
So, basically just moving in one direction.
Basically. But violent.
Oh, well, there's that.
Another parallel to their journey. Moving in one direction, there's always violence, but in a constant fear of fumbling the football. That football being Ellie. As in the games, you do run into some monkeys who used to be in the zoology labs. Meanwhile, the way Joel and Ellie find the monkeys instead of clickers upstairs is just like it is in the game.
Well, at least it ain't clickers. At least it ain't clickers.
We find the Fireflies have cleared out of the university hospital with a packing list that mentions Salt Lake City. And upstairs they find a map with pins leading to Salt Lake City and St. Mary's on that map, which is the hospital they will be headed to. White pins seem to lead from Colorado where they are, but there are other separate pin trails, blue leading southwest to Southern California, red leading upward to Seattle, green moving east across the Great Plains, white continuing southeast toward New Mexico. Joel and Ellie run into a group of raiders and Joel breaks one guy's neck but gets a jagged shank stabbed into his gut, which he pulls out. And I know Craig Mazin knows this because he's talked about it at length on his Script Notes podcast, but despite what you see in TV shows and movies, you should never pull out an object that gets stabbed into you. Now, we shouldn't expect Joel to know that, but Mazin knows how much worse Joel just made it. In the game, the weapon is a piece of rebar, but here, it looks like a broken end of a baseball bat. Joel goes into shock as he bleeds and Ellie freaks out.
I can't do this without you. I don't know where I'm going. What the I'm gonna do.
Last episode, we learned Ellie's greatest fear. I'm scared of ending up alone. And now that is where she seems to be. The music we hear over the end is a softer cover of Depeche Mode's Never Let Me Down Again. That was a song that ended episode 1, and it was a song that Craig Mazin promised would come back later in the season. Here it is. Remember, that 80s song was, in that moment, like all 80s songs, meant to communicate danger ahead, according to Frank's radio code. So in addition to danger approaching, we also end this episode in Joel's greatest fear and Ellie's greatest fear together. Just like the way he merged their dreams of sheep on the moon, now their greatest fears are merged together. She is facing being left alone. He is facing being too weak to be able to take care of a daughter figure. And speaking of fathers and daughters, the vocalist covering Never Let Me Down Again is actually Craig Mazin's own daughter, Jessie. So episode 1 was male Gen Xers singing these words. Now it's a solitary voice of a Gen Zer singing it back to them in a kind of broken prayer. Okay, there's quite a bit to discuss here in Spoiler Corner, and there's gonna be spoilers for both The Last of Us Part 1 and Last of Us Part 2 games coming ahead. So this episode jumps ahead 3 months, and I don't think it's meant to just show the passage of time beyond Henry and Sam. Practically speaking, it also gives Marlene enough time to make it from the Boston QZ to Salt Lake City, setting up her return in the events of the hospital that I assume will be this season's finale. Ellie's dream of becoming an astronaut, setting up the moment in the game when Joel takes her to a NASA exhibit as a birthday present with an audio recording that allows her to imagine she's an astronaut. In the games, we do not see Jackson until after the events of Salt Lake City, of course, really the opening sections of part 2 of the game. So a lot of the stuff from part 2 they hinted at in this episode, and that includes the girl who stares at Ellie, whom Ellie yells at, who most likely will be revealed as Dina, her partner from part 2 of the game. Their introduction in the game is pretty similar to what we see here. Also, we probably caught Joel mentioning he wanted to be a singer. Sounds like this might be setting up the whole thing of Joel saying he wanted to teach Ellie guitar and singing in the game. But most importantly, the map. It's interesting for one trail to lead back toward New Mexico and Texas, because in the game, Tommy tells Joel at the dam that he had gone back to Austin at some point, went back to their house, most of it had been looted except a photo of Joel and Sarah, and Joel does not want the photo. The fact that we don't see that moment here in this episode makes me wonder if they might be saving that moment for the season finale. Also, on that map, yeah, trails to Seattle and a trail to Southern California. Seattle, a very important location to go to in part 2, and then after Seattle, you go on a trip to Santa Barbara and looking for a Firefly community on Catalina Island. So I think this map right here charts out everything we're headed to in season 2. And this is a breakdown of The Last of Us episode 7, which adapts the Left Behind DLC of the games, exploring Ellie's backstory with Riley as they explore the 4 to 5 wonders of the mall, which somehow didn't include natural wonders. Remember that store? It's where us sensitive kids went because we were too soft for Spencer's gifts. Okay, so the episode opens from the point of view of someone sliding on the ground past these suburban houses. We see a trail of blood in the snow, and then inside Joel's sleeping bag with rope, bloodstained, showing how Ellie had her horse drag Joel on this sleeping bag through the street, meaning we were opening from Joel's point of view as he was being dragged. This poor horse has to shake some snow off its head. Ellie didn't even have time to thaw it out. Joel tells Ellie that she should leave him and go north to Tommy. They're in the basement of this house, which, based on the broken in windows on the ground level, might be the warmest place in there. Ellie pauses at the top of the stairs, and then we edit on her grabbing the doorknob. She's not slowly leaving in defeat. She's still in a hurry. She's rushing to find supplies to save Joel. Now, the Left Behind DLC shows this moment in the game, and in the game you really intercut from the flashback to the present as Ellie's scrambling to find supplies in the pharmacy to save Joel. Here the present day events actually just bookend the episode. But here we flash back to Ellie a few weeks before we met her in episode 1 as Ellie in Fedra's school runs in gym class listening to a Walkman playing Pearl Jam's All or None. It's from the 2002 album Riot Act, which came out just a year before Outbreak Day in 2003 and would have been one of the most recent and moodiest things a kid could listen to right now. Eddie Vedder's lyrics are, "It's a hopeless situation, and I'm starting to believe that this hopeless situation is what I'm trying to achieve." Ellie feels hopeless in this Fedra system and is starting to think this is actually just what she's trying to achieve. A mean girl, Bethany, yanks off Ellie's headphone, and Bethany is around and about to find out, saying that Ellie doesn't fight, it's her friend who fights for her and her friend's not around. And I love how the song comes back despite Ellie not putting her headphones back on, showing how she is mentally transitioning back into that hopeless headspace and doesn't give a shit. Now throughout this, the overhead lights in the gym are flickering a bit, showing how Fedra hasn't really set up a good infrastructure in the Boston QZ. Fedra cannot truly promise the light, only the Fireflies can. Ellie punches Bethany and we cut to her with her head back, black eye, making it look like she really knocked herself out with a punch. Outside this office, we can hear seagulls, just a nice acoustic effect, reminding us that we're back in Boston. Captain Kwong is a framed photo of his family, little example of Fedra officers being a bit humanized, which is why Ellie reacts so strongly against Riley's freedom fighting, aka terrorism. Kwong tells Ellie,
"And that'll be your life from now until you catch a bullet from a Firefly or fall drunk off a roof or get your hair caught in a moving tank tread."
Get your hair caught in a tank tread? Has this happened before? Yikes! He uses his mug to represent one path and his keys with a puppy print to represent the Fedra path. One representing a food ration soup that you'd get in a handout, another representing active access to a vehicle or a residence, an open door. Kwong tells her Fedra is the only thing keeping it from falling apart, but says,
"There's a leader in you, and one day it could be your turn."
Yes, the one piece of actual valuable advice he leaves Ellie with, because Ellie will, in this episode with Joel, have to step up as the leader. In Ellie's dorm, we see dinosaurs and a lunar chart and space shuttle drawings. Again, Ellie is fascinated by space travel and Sally ride, and the book, no pun intended, the first volume by Will Livingston, This Oughter Be Good. And on her walls is a poster for the 2000 movie Red Planet, and behind her bed, a poster for the 1987 Dennis Quaid film Inner Space. Ellie reads an issue of Savage Starlight. This is issue number 8, Negentropy, described as, "With Captain Ryan's leadership and Daniela's technological expertise, the raids of the Last Watch have become ever more daring. As a scientist, can she bear to use her gifts for destruction?" You actually find this issue later in the game in the Lakeside Resort on a green bench, the part of the game that we will likely see next episode. The pages Ellie reads here show Captain Ryan and Daniela blasting through a door. But keep in mind that description I mentioned, the idea of a doctor using their gifts of science for destruction. I'll talk about that a bit more in Spoiler Corner. On Ellie's nightstand is her switchblade, the one given to her by her mother, and around the room as she sleeps, we see cassette tapes for Etta James and the hits of Aha. Aha's Take On Me later plays in the mall, and the song has a major significance to both Joel and Ellie in the games. Now there is an empty bed in her room in the Left Behind DLC. Riley comments how Ellie's lucky for still not having a roommate in the bunk bed above her. And here, Riley sneaks in and puts her hand over Ellie's mouth. In the game, Riley jumps in and bites her neck, pretending to be infected, foreshadowing both of these girls getting bitten this episode. Riley confesses that she has joined the Fireflies simply by showing Ellie her gun. In the game, Riley shows Ellie her tag necklace, but it's interesting how the gun is enough for Ellie to know that she's telling the truth, because there's no other way Riley would be able to get a gun. As they make their way out into the night, Ellie mentions a 7-Eleven incident that burnt off one of her eyebrows, which explains why part of her left eyebrow is singed off.
No thanks, I'd like to keep my other eyebrow in one piece.
Ellie's flashlight glitches.
Firefly lights are better.
Just a reminder of that Firefly creed, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. They climb 7 flights of stairs, climbing way too many flights of stairs, as Ellie will do with Joel and KC, and they find this guy who OD'd on pills and booze. Now in the game, you actually get alcohol from the tent of their friend Winston. Winston was the guy who taught Ellie how to ride a horse. But we don't meet Winston here, this is just an anonymous corpse. At first it looks like it's Cordyceps coming out of his mouth, but it's not. It's just chunks of vomit from when he threw up from ODing. And he falls through a cartoonishly perfect hole in the floor. Ellie asks Riley,
"Is that the first dead body you ever saw?"
No. My parents.
Yeah, sorry, I know. I mean, I knew that.
Yes, so Riley's backstory is that when she was young, her dad got infected and tore her mother to shreds. And so Riley was forced to kill her dad to survive. Riley lets Ellie hold her gun, and it looks like this is the first time Ellie has handled a pistol, which gives greater significance to Ellie cradling that pistol back in episode 4 when she kissed it. In that moment, she was remembering Riley. They make it to the Liberty Gardens Shopping Center. This is the mall in the games where Ellie and Riley goof around in. Riley explains that when Fedra connected the nearby block to expand the residences, the mall lights came on too. 2, which allows Riley to give Ellie this wonderful gift. Ellie's Fedra flashlight flickers off, and so this Firefly gives Ellie the gift of light, as each row of stores lights up like a Christmas tree. Compared to the game, it actually seems like Riley did a lot more to plan out this night for Ellie. Rather than it just being a gift of them going to the mall together, Riley planned out a schedule for Ellie. Aha's Take On Me plays, which in addition to its significance to Ellie and Joel later in the games, it also is just a great 80s song playing in a shopping mall. Shopping malls are kind of a symbolic rite of passage for kids who grew up in the 80s. Now in front of the cinema is a movie poster, Dawn of the Wolf. This is a fictional movie series in the games meant to parody Twilight and Twilight Breaking Dawn. Joel's daughter Sarah actually had a Dawn of the Wolf poster in her bedroom in the game, and you'll notice in the box office there's a poster for a Bill Murray Scarlett Johansson movie. This is Lost in Translation, which has a tagline, "Everyone wants to be found," which of course also really applies to Ellie on this journey. Also, it's interesting how in all of the looting, someone took the time to tag this LensCrafters ad with luscious lipstick and the Woman in the East Spirit ad to be missing a tooth. This was either Riley herself or the Cyclops from Shrek the Third who rips stamps off letters. See, I remember all messy chaos bitches. They wonder why anyone would ever wear Victoria's Secret lingerie, and Riley says she imagined Ellie wearing it, making her laugh, but you can see how this flatters Ellie a bit. She fixes her hair in the glass reflection, and her face floats over one of those mannequin busts. There is just something about shopping malls with those Abercrombie bags that sexually activates every teen. For teenage Erik, it was the unicorn wind chimes and natural wonders. The shirts at Hot Topic were just too aggressive. As they do in the game, they find a carousel, one of my favorite moments in the game because you stay in Ellie's point of view as the mall spins around you. But this carousel has an interesting song.
No way.
Yep.
This is a version of The Cure's 1987 Just Like Heaven, but a rockabye baby lullaby rendition of Cure songs, thus the dollhouse/music box instrumentation. I know, I've never ridden a carousel with the music taste of the Duffer Brothers, but here we are. Now, according to The Cure lead singer Robert Smith, Just Like Heaven is, quote, about hyperventilating, kissing, and fainting to the floor. Smith said the opening line of the song, show me, show me, show me how you do that trick, refers to his childhood memories of mastering magic tricks, but he added, quote, on another level, it's about a seduction trick from much later in my life. And this song reflects how Riley is taking Ellie's breath away with these magical gifts. But let's remember, 80s songs are this show's code for danger ahead. And while Ellie rides a fake horse here, her true destiny is beyond this, to ride an actual horse, a horse that she forgets to brush the snow off of. Riley reveals that Kwong gave her sewage detail, which is the worst assignment. But remember, this is a gig that Joel took in episode 1 because it paid the best. If things had gone differently, Riley would have been supervising Joel. Riley eyes the photo booth and Ellie asks,
Is that a time machine?
Come on.
In a way, a photo booth is a sort of metaphorical time machine, a booth that freezes its occupants in time with a string of photos. In the game, this photo booth prompts Ellie and Riley to share the photos on Facebook, and they have no idea what Facebook is. And then after retrying it again and again, Riley just punches it until it shuts down. But this screen inside the booth shows a white rabbit wearing sunglasses. In last week's breakdown, I pointed out how the hunted white rabbit that Ellie steals parallels her own innocent self. Ellie becomes the rabbit here when they give each other bunny ears. And they end by pretending to be monsters, like the infected forms they become, or at least one of them becomes, because though Ellie doesn't know it yet, she is immune. This photo film does not print fully, likely because the film has been partially exposed, or maybe the chemicals have just started to break down. Raja's arcade sign looks exactly as it does in the game, and the name Raja is actually a Naughty Dog reference to another big Naughty Dog franchise, Uncharted. The characters Eddie Raja and Rika Raja, and the street signs in Uncharted 2 among thieves for the Nepalese club, Club Raja. But instead of the fake in-universe games, these are all real games that kids who hung out in arcades in 2003 would remember. You got your Tetris, your Frogger, an Attack from Mars pinball machine, Daytona USA. All that's really missing is Dance Dance Revolution, Time Crisis 2, some House of the Dead, but yep, we do get Mortal Kombat 2, which Ellie referenced with Melina in episode 3. In the game, there are some fighter games like Tetsumashu Tournament and Fighter Instinct 10, but there's also a game called The Turning that you actually play in the game, though Riley makes Ellie close her eyes so you just see Ellie's face while you hit the controls, not really knowing what is on the screen. Now, the name The Turning was actually based on Neil Druckmann's original title of The Last of Us comics when he pitched it to Naughty Dog to be a game. And I love it, when they dropped the coins in to start the game, Craig Mason actually said that he told the sound mixers to really go hard on the game sounds, on the game start sound effect with heavy bass, just to surround us with the feeling of playing one of these arcade games. In this game of Mortal Kombat 2, Ellie picks Raiden, excellent choice. Riley picks Melina, and since Ellie doesn't get any hits on her, it is a flawless victory, which is why Riley says flawless horseshit. And Riley gets to do Melina's kiss of death fatality that Ellie described in episode 3 where he spit out the bones. But yes, this does mirror the kiss of death that infected perform on their victims and try to do on Ellie in this episode. We slowly pull back out of the arcade and then we move to what was already the most terrifying store in any mall before the apocalypse, the American Girl doll shop. Every story has a star. Horses whinny because they're always scared. And here, the runner comes alive. And if this guy was hanging out in an American Girl doll shop, what kind of monster was he to begin with? Do you really have a daughter, sir, or is this for you? I mean, I don't want to toy shame, but just grab some Attack of the Clones Dooku lightsabers over at KB Toys. I know in this breakdown you're learning a lot about 2003 era mall era. And just to warn you, he smelled way worse than this guy did. So Ellie now picks Baraka for the second round, and she wins, doing Baraka's fatality finishing move on Melina. And this is almost a moment where the girls kiss, but Riley moves on, and that triggers Ellie to want to back out and go home. But Riley lures her in to stay with the promise of a gift. Will Livingston's No Pun Intended Volume 2.
What did the frustrated cannibal do?
Lay it on me.
He threw up his hands.
A bit of deeper significance here that I will cover in Spoiler Corner. But then Ellie reads,
How does a computer get drunk? It takes screenshots.
What are screenshots?
I don't actually know.
yes, like the Facebook confusion in the game. In a world that shuts down in 2003, there's no way these girls are gonna get tech references. But Ellie finds Riley's Firefly bombs.
What do you call an alligator in a vest?
We don't get the answer, but the answer is an investigator, as Ellie is now investigating this crime scene. And if you like investigations and don't mind puns too much, you really should subscribe to our new channel, The Deep Dive. One actually wonders if one of these pipe bombs was the one that was used on the building Tess was in back in episode 1. So Ellie's Fedra indoctrination makes her disgusted to find these bombs, and Riley says that she's leaving to the Atlanta QZ. Now, we only ever hear of the Atlanta QZ in the games in the Pittsburgh section when the Atlanta QZ takes command over Pittsburgh's remaining Fedra forces, suggesting Atlanta is a key Fedra stronghold, which would make sense considering in real life that is where the CDC is headquartered. And I played the tabletop game Pandemic Legacy Season 1, and I let the city of Atlanta outbreak in the first month, and I lost my starter research station, which really f***ed me. Atlanta, very important place in any pandemic post-apocalypse. Riley said Marlene wouldn't let Riley take Ellie with her, suggesting Marley had her eye on Ellie and didn't want her to leave the Boston QZ. Ellie storms off and decides to go back, and for a second, we think tragedy is already struck with the sound of a scream, but it is just a Halloween decoration. Great fake out.
I thought you'd like this one the best, so I saved it for last.
Now in the game, this costume shop is actually one of the first places they go to, and they move around wearing the same masks as they do here. Riley wearing the clown mask, Ellie wearing the werewolf mask, though in the game, they switch to a witch mask. Riley says,
You don't know what it was like to have a family, to belong.
It's a kind of hurtful thing to say, but Ellie doesn't take offense because Riley is right. Riley suffers more because she remembers her family and will always need to belong to some family. Like Tommy, she is a joiner. Ellie and Joel were both colder before they met each other, but upon forming this familial partnership, that love makes them more vulnerable, what this show's creators call the toxicity of unconditional love. Riley plays Ellie's other tape cassette that we saw earlier, Etta James, I Got You Babe, the arguably lesser known but definitely better version compared to the Sonny and Cher version. This Etta James I Got You Babe also plays in the Left Behind game. Ellie asks Riley not to go. Riley says okay, and they kiss. Yet, like Melina's kiss of death and all pure love in this story, it is a deadly force. The angriest American Girl dad plows through the store, and as he grabs Ellie, if you look closely, already some fungal tendrils are starting to reach out of his mouth. This runner is literally wearing Nike Just Do It track pants, so he may have actually been a bit athletic before getting infected, though I don't know. A lot of guys in Boston will wear Nike gear. Doesn't mean they're fit, but this guy's particularly hard to take down. Ellie stabs him in the side a few times, but that's no good. She has to stab him through the brain to take him down. Riley at this point already knows she's been bitten by the time Ellie's celebrating, which is why she doesn't celebrate with her. She's already come to terms with her fate, but it crushes her even more when she notices Ellie's bite. And notice how Riley is standing in front of a haunted forest backdrop with a ghostly form at the bottom of it. Tragic irony given her current fate. It's interesting that we cut directly from this, no fade to black, no bumper transition, right to Joel trembling back on the floor in the present. This abrupt edit makes it seem like Joel is in the same place as they are. are, like that dead runner on the floor has turned into him, both of them with stab wounds in their sides. And for Ellie, mentally, these moments are merged. She lost Riley, and so she's determined not to lose Joel too. Like Captain Kwong, Riley presents two options: the quick and painless option, suicide, or the one in which they do not quit, they just last as long as they can before they turn. The fact that they choose losing their minds together is what saves Ellie, because had they decided to prematurely end it, Ellie never would have discovered her immunity. And so after some good old-fashioned Last of Us drawer searching, Ellie finds exactly what she needs: a needle and thread to stitch Joel back up. And so she finally gave herself an option 3 by stepping up as a leader to save the partner she loves. Okay, on to spoiler corner. That joke about cannibals, yup, gotta be a nod to the group of cannibals Ellie's about to meet next week, led by David. And that Savage Starlight issue about a scientist using their gifts for destruction. Big spoiler if you have not played part 1 of the game coming up here. I think that is setting up the ethical dilemma that we will face in the finale, when the doctors at St. Mary's in Salt Lake City intend to operate on Ellie to remove the cordyceps from her brain, an operation that could save humanity but will kill Ellie unless Joel intervenes to stop it. And yes, it adds a deeper layer of tragic subtext to have Ellie and Riley listening to Aha's Take On Me, considering that will be the song that Ellie plays on guitar for Dina, her future girlfriend, assuming they adapt season 2 from part 2 of the game. And this is a breakdown of The Last of Us episode 8. We're at Todd's Steakhouse, maybe stick to the salad bar. Let's break this down scene by scene for the details you might have missed, the references to the game, the changes from the game, and how chilling this episode truly is. Okay, we open on the blizzardy lakeside resort of Silver Lake, where David reads Revelation 21 from the New Testament.
And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away.
Revelation 21 is the penultimate chapter to the Bible, preceding Revelation 22, as this is the penultimate episode of the season. In this section of Revelation, the author, John, describes the resolution to the war between good and evil when both heaven and earth were remade and God wipes away all suffering. This is what David says drew him to Christianity during the apocalypse, where the end of the world has already happened, and these verses in Revelation describe the salvation that comes after those dark times, foretelling that the world must be destroyed so that a new heaven and new earth can be one. Of course, we later learn that this is just some convenient Bible verses that suits the way David really looks at the world. David's supposed Christianity is not so pronounced in the game. He's not a preacher that we know of, but he does tell Ellie that he believes all things happen for a reason, and the game does have that same banner of when we are in need, he shall provide. We don't yet know here that David is a cannibal. For all we know, these could just be grieving Christians, so it makes it harder to judge the character of David in the first half of the episode, just as it is in the game when, as Ellie, you initially team up with David. Outside the steakhouse, you can see claw marks on the wooden planks, some bears sniffing the meat inside, perhaps. The freezing temperature reflects another bit of religious poetry, Dante's Inferno, in which the bottom circle of hell is frozen, for it is the furthest away from God's warmth. And David uses the end of the passage to console the mother and daughter of the raider that Joel killed back on the campus.
And God will wipe away all tears from their eyes, for there will be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither will there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away.
So David's interpretation for them is that suffering is of the mortal earth, but it's not exactly consoling for those of us still living on this earth. Hannah asks when they can bury her dad, and David checks in with James before responding,
The ground is too cold to dig. We'll bury your father in the spring.
Yeah, I don't think that's the only reason why. David later says only a few people know that they've resorted to cannibalism, and I think David wants to keep a few spare ribs on the menu. David's lieutenant, James, is played by Troy Baker, who played Joel in the games and hosts the amazing HBO Last of Us podcast with Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. Both Troy Baker and Ellie game actress Ashley Johnson have roles on this show. Johnson will appear next episode as Anna, Ellie's mother, while Merle Dandridge is the one actor on the show who also played her character Marlene in the games. David asks James how much they have left, and after a pause, he clarifies venison, elk, and rabbit, indicating that they've already probably begun mixing human meat into the food supply. David's really asking for a countdown of how long they have before they have to start killing current residents and letting everyone know that this is what they've been doing. If David acts like he's the second coming of Jesus, James is the analog of the doubting Thomas, who must see to believe. Though interestingly, it's Ellie's wrist scarring that opens his eyes, and Joel with the stab wound in his side, the two of them together representing the great redeemer of this episode. This episode adapts the part of the game where you play as Ellie at the lakeside resort location as Joel is recovering from his injury, and it presents a whole new challenge playing as a character who hasn't had the same experience as the other protagonist. Ellie uses a bow and arrow in the game instead of Tommy's rifle with the scope here, and we don't really get to know David quite as well. And they removed a section from the game where Ellie and David team up to escape a horde of infected. Ellie first spots a white rabbit. Back in episode 6, I pointed out this show drawing a comparison between the white rabbit that Ellie takes and Ellie herself, a motif continued in episode 7 with the white rabbit in the mall photo booth. And now it definitely seems intentional. This white rabbit ends up getting away, its innocent white fur disappearing in the snow as Ellie escapes this episode into the white blizzard. You can also draw a connection to Alice in Wonderland. Alice chases a white rabbit through the portal into another world, as Ellie, you could argue, does here, with David being the grinning Cheshire cat, though that cat isn't even the biggest threat. The Queen of Hearts is, and in the show, our Queen of Hearts is, actually we'll get to that in spoiler corner. As you do in the game, Ellie has to follow the blood trail from the deer, where that wounded deer eventually collapses, and she finds David and James there. The conversation is almost word for word, except Ellie holds him up with a gun instead of a bow and arrow.
Any sudden moves, I put one right between your eyes. Ditto for Buddy Boy.
And like Ellie in the game, Ellie ends up being unable to hide her desperation.
What do you need? We have boots.
Medicine?
Now Ellie needs penicillin, which is an antibiotic that ironically is derived from fungus, which the opening scene of the series actually foreshadowed.
Where do we get penicillin from?
Fungus.
By revealing she needs medicine, Ellie outs herself for having some wounded partner, so that from here forward, David definitely knows she is the girl his group is looking for. Like, notice he asks,
That's your dad's gun? You the one that's sick? That's why you're out here on your own?
Ellie smartly unloads both their rifles, showing that she has learned from Joel from back in episode 3, when he stowed his gun under the floorboards. It's not always worth it to carry these bulky guns with you. At the end of the day, it's sometimes better to disable these other guns, the ones that you can't carry, so that they can't end up being used against you. While Ellie points a rifle at them, interesting to see her struggle with the weight of the gun, which apparently Bella Ramsey really did when they were shooting this. Those things are heavy for kids. Just another tell for David that she's still getting used to this gun and it belongs really to someone else. David says that he's a preacher who found his calling after the world ended.
Before that, I was a teacher. Math. Taught kids about your age.
Now, saying he's a teacher is similar to the moment in Saving Private Ryan when Captain Miller finally reveals that before joining the army, he was a high school English teacher. In fact, that movie came out in 1998. For all we know, David just saw that movie and saw how quickly it won over the trust of his group and thought, you know what, I might use that. It's probably likely that David isn't telling the truth because later he says,
I've always had a violent heart. And I struggled with it for a long time, but then the world ended and I was shown the truth.
And so David's backstory is left a mystery and it probably wasn't good. He's kind of like Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight, or to borrow from another survivalist series, Lost, like Ben Linus when he claims to be Henry Gale, when for him the shoe was on the other foot and he was locked in a kitchen in season 2. We learn more and more frightening things about David as this episode goes. But here David says,
but when the Pittsburgh QZ fell in 17, Fireflies and Fedra, I left with a few others, and that's how I ended up with our flock.
So there's a good chance he was in Pittsburgh, which in the show they bypassed, but in the game, that is where the Henry and Sam events take place. David also calls his group his flock, a common preacher metaphor, which is a bit ironic since its actor is Scott Shepherd, who is in a bunch of things, including True Detective Season 3. I really love this conversation because in the game, all you really get is David saying, everything happens for a reason, and then segueing into him saying she and Joel were the ones they were looking for, but now Ellie and we are lured into this false sense of security just by David's affable charm. David tells James to give her the medicine and lets her escape. Now, why does he do this? This thing a lot of game players were speculating about, and the actor who played David in the games, Nolan North, whom Tommy and I interviewed on New Rockstars a few years back, Nolan North said that David's interest in Ellie, especially when he puts his hand on hers later, wasn't necessarily in the game overtly sexual, but that idea does start to creep into David's mind as he considers himself a protector growing a community.
He clearly likes to get his way. You know, when you're put in that situation, maybe the population is, you know, his group, and there's not as many women, and he wants to repopulate his area, and here's somebody who's clearly a survivor.
And by the way, look at baby Greg Miller there! I love what Greg, Tim, Colin, and Nick and the rest have built with Kind of Funny. They got an amazing team over there. But unlike the games, we spent a lot of time with David's community, and we witnessed their suspicions that they are eating human flesh.
What is it?
Venison.
It's just so creepy that in their food prep process, the meat has to come from another room. And yes, in this case, this meat is probably this woman's husband, whom Joel killed and David refused to bury. Also, raw meat in soup broth? You're not gonna grill it or sear it first and then deglaze it and then add the stock? I think we need Uncle Roger in here. David returns with a deer framed perfectly under the "he shall provide" banner, but there's no joy in the room since they've all heard now that David let Ellie get away. And Hannah even says that David should have killed them both, and David hits her, but then helps her back up. Yes, this guy definitely came from a violent past, and he sits at their table in the seat of the guy they're probably now eating. And they add injury to it by saying grace, saying,
Teach us to know by whom we're fed. Bless us with Christ, the living bread.
Yeah, Christ, the living bread, definitely a parallel here with Jesus at the Last Supper saying, take this all of you and eat it, this is my body. This group perversely distorting that to justify cannibalism. While the residents gobble down their probably man stew, the guy who brought in the meat is a bit slower to put a chunk of it in his mouth because he's the one who chopped the guy up. David leads a hunting party to the neighborhood and orders to leave Ellie alive.
If we leave her out here, she'll die. Yeah, maybe that's God's will.
Yeah, David is threatened by James interpreting what God's will is because David's gatekeeping of God's will is the bedrock of his power. Ellie lures them off on horseback, which in the game is way longer and a way more intense chase through the cabins, but it ends the same way, the horse sadly getting shot and Ellie falling off it. But rather than having some time to hide in the cabins and look through a bunch of drawers, she gets taken right away, spared by David. In the game, Ellie wakes up in the cage to find a human body already getting butchered. Here we get an extra scene where David is a level of menacing without being revealed as a fully fledged cannibal yet. The fact that the cage is here in this room is horrifying. It means that past prisoners had to watch as the others were being butchered in front of them, knowing that they would be next. Meanwhile, back in the house, Joel's torture scene goes down pretty much exactly as it does in the game, but now we see how he trapped the two guys in David's group, using a wounded survivor as a trap, just as he knew this tactic was a trap when they first drove into KC, since he had done that before. This is the darkest we have seen Joel since he beat the guard to death outside the Boston QZ, and Pedro Pascal plays it not with evil in his eyes, but with just exhaustion. As in the game, he puts the bloody knife in the guy's mouth to point to the map, some brutal pragmatism because he essentially made a marker. Kind of like Dolores Umbridge torturing Harry Potter by making him write lines with his own blood. But just as in the game cutscene, it ends with,
It's okay.
No.
I believe him.
No.
That's all right. I believe him.
no, wait! Now the game actually shows the pipe hitting the head, thankfully not here, because we are not in Joel's perspective, we are in his victim's perspective. So not until David brings the plate of food does Ellie notice the ear on the ground. She refuses to eat the food, whereas in the game, Ellie trusts that it's deer meat and she eats some of it before she kicks the plate. But this script in this scene gives David a lot more of a rationale. He says that this was the last resort to keep his people from starving. And not to defend cannibalism in really any context, but I do recommend you read up on the story of the Uruguayan rugby team on Flight 571 in 1972. These were the events that inspired the movie Alive, when these group of survivors crashed in the Andes Mountains and they had to resort to cannibalism to survive. It's an insane story, but these guys had to rationalize cannibalism as just a group of friends knowing they wouldn't survive, hoping that their bodies would be used to keep their friends going. Perhaps a more apt historical comparison would be the Donner Party of 1846, 1847, a group of pioneers who got stuck in the freezing cold temperatures of the California Sierra Nevadas, and some of whom had to resort to cannibalism. Of course, this is a whole other thing than what we see here. I mean, we know there are deer and rabbit in those woods if they just look hard enough, and it's never, ever, ever, ever justified to murder someone and Jeffrey Dahmer their corpse. But David has an even wilder rationale. He says he was shown the truth not by God, but by Cordyceps.
What does Cordyceps do? Is it evil? No. It's fruitful. It multiplies. It feeds and protects its children. And it secures its future with violence if it must. It loves.
So David really exposes himself as a false preacher, or at least a guy who distorts the tenets of Christianity to suit his own perverse worldview. He worships an amoral natural force, saying, quote, it's fruitful, it multiplies, which is a reference to Genesis 35:11. This episode begins with Revelation and ends with Genesis. In Genesis, God said to Jacob, renaming him Israel, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body. Another hint at David's true Jeffrey Epsteinian goal to seek mates to produce as many offspring as possible. And David ends by saying Cordyceps loves, a recurring message from Mason and Druckmann, the destructive power of love, and how Cordyceps, with its kissy oral transmissions, shows how love can be toxic. David places his hand on the bars.
We'd make this place perfect. We'd grow, spread out, and we'd do whatever we needed for our people.
Yeah, he says grow, spread out, like he's describing the fungal outgrowth in the opening credits. Ellie seems to engage with him for a second, but breaks his finger and tries to steal the keys. This is how the scene ends in the game, both times with David saying,
how did you put it? Tiny little pieces?
How did you put it? Tiny pieces.
Now, instead of Ellie seeing the corpse being butchered in the game, the first glimpse of the corpses here is left for Joel. A few bodies suspended from above is a lot like the bodies that Joel runs past in the games later. It's just really freaky to pass these. Ellie escapes the same way, by biting David and claiming to be infected, showing them her arm, and using that hesitation to get James in the neck. But one interesting change here is that the fire in the restaurant is caused by Ellie throwing a log. In the game, a lantern gets knocked over, so here it becomes a hell of Ellie's own making, and David maniacally decides not to leave. Fighting David in the game is not easy. You have to sneak up behind him and be careful not to step on broken plates because David will hear you and turn around. And you gotta stab him 3 times, but after the second stab, David stops just casually around calling your name and begins to crouch and sneak around himself. And they pay homage to that here in the way that Ellie sneaks up behind David and makes a mistake. Ellie yells in rage before she stabs him, alerting David to turn around and throw her. She can't help herself because David has just creepily said he's gonna be her dad and quote, teach her. To me, this is David admitting his story about being a teacher was a lie. His version of teaching was probably some kind of horrible abuse or violence, because he finally reveals while on top of her, the fighting is the part he likes the most. Gross. The ambiguity that was there in the game is not ambiguous here. David pins her saying,
"There's no fear in love."
This is the ultimate bullshit that proves David has never actually loved anyone, because nothing is scarier than love. As Joel and Ellie know, to truly love something is to feel vulnerable, to feel that you will lose that person or that something awful might happen to them. So Ellie doesn't just kill David, she absolutely destroys him and everything he represents. And I'm so grateful this butchery goes down exactly as it does in the game, and I'm blown away with the intensity that Bella Ramsey brings. You can hear her voice give out on that last scream. Now in the game, Joel pulls Ellie off of David, but this show lets Ellie finish until she feels complete, and Joel catches her outside.
It's okay, baby girl. I got you. I got you.
He calls her baby girl, the first time Joel allows himself to verbally relate to Ellie as he would his daughter. And notice in the shot of Joel hugging Ellie, his broken watch from Sarah, the one frozen in time for the moment of Sarah's death, is framed front and center. Joel has now fully mapped his love for Sarah onto his love for his new daughter Ellie. Ellie has renewed Joel's purpose of guardianship. And Joel and Ellie in this episode not relieved, but afraid, because despite what David said, there is fear in love. That fear is what makes it so rewarding when the love is given back to you, because you are just two panicked souls clutching each other in the cold, giving each other permission to feel afraid. So you know what? Anyone who says there's no fear in love. Okay. Let's quickly check into Spoiler Corner. One more episode left, folks, and I mentioned the Alice in Wonderland parallel before. Despite how evil David clearly is, I think the ultimate Queen of Hearts of this Wonderland is Marlene. Marlene is the Firefly leader who manipulated Joel and Ellie to get to the St. Mary's Hospital to surgically sacrifice Ellie for a cure. We'll see how that goes down in next week's finale. And this is a breakdown of The Last of Us Episode 9, the finale, Look for the Light, an episode title that bookends the title of Episode 1, When You're Lost in the Darkness, completing the Firefly catchphrase, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light, which is ironic considering Joel does the worst possible thing to the Firefly cause. Okay, the episode opens with a very pregnant Anna. This is Ellie's mother, and she's played by Ashley Johnson, who played Ellie for the games. Johnson's known for a number of roles, including the waitress Captain America flirted with in a deleted subplot of the 2012 Avengers film, and her first role as Chrissy Seaver on Growing Pains, and her most critical of roles on Critical Role on YouTube. She's awesome. Now in the game, we never actually meet Anna. She's only referred to when Marlene said she promised Ellie's mother she'd take care of her. Also, there's no father depicted here. It leaves the full circumstances of Ellie's conception a bit of a mystery as it is in the games. And also, I think we'd all struggle seeing a father figure who's not Joel. But this image of a lone, vulnerable woman running through nature is kind of a horror archetype, something that we see in Evil Dead. And we actually saw a version of it here in this series with the infected kid wandering through the woods outside Boston in episode 1. You could argue the same woods that Anna is now running through. This endows Ellie's origin with a bit of divine mystery, like the single mother of Moses setting her baby down the Nile to one day be a savior. The name Ellie draws its root from the Hebrew El, meaning God. Anna calls out to other Fireflies she hopes will be in the house, showing that she fled here hoping that she would find Firefly backup. She was lost in the darkness and looked for the light, and she found no light. This episode is really priming us to not feel very optimistic for Firefly redemption. Ellie hides in a room that was clearly a kid's bedroom. The curtains have cartoon vehicles and traffic signs, but while this may have been a nursery, this will also also be her tomb. She pulls out the switchblade, the one later carried by Ellie, but the pain is so severe she drops it right as the runner is pounding on this door. And it is truly frightening to see this runner crawling on all fours at top speed, like a wolf. It actually recalls a charge made by Mama in Mama. Anna manages to stab this runner in the neck, but even after the final stab, you can see Cordyceps mouth tendrils reaching out in one final you grasp. And since Johnson did voice and do all the motion for Ellie in the game, when she cries here, we are hearing the voice of Ellie, which just makes for an interesting mix with the baby Ellie in this scene crying. Anna notices the baby on the floor and then notices the bite on her leg. So even she's not really sure whether the baby was born before the bite, and she rushes to cut the umbilical cord, and as soon as she cuts it, now the baby stops crying. Now the exact timing of this is left off camera, which is important. And you know what, let's all acknowledge that we are in uncharted waters when it comes to fictional infections and prenatal health. We don't know for sure if the cordyceps from a leg bite could affect an actively crowning fetus in some unique way to make the baby immune, or if Ellie's immunity was a result of an antibody rapidly forming at the moment of birth. But normally newborns' immune systems aren't yet fully developed, so you could say it's possible that Ellie since conception had a genetic condition and this was really just her first test. Then again later, Marley says that the doctor thinks Ellie has had cordyceps since birth, and that the cordyceps she has produces a chemical messenger to make Cordyceps think she's Cordyceps too. But there remain some confusing aspects about this that we'll talk about later. Anna tells her newborn daughter, "I got you." Exactly what Joel tells his baby girl at the end of episode 8. Now, it is interesting how this flashback is bisected by the episode's opening credits, as opposed to having the whole flashback contained within the cold open and then have the credits. This structural choice results in the fungal outgrowth of the opening credit imagery being framed as an inner process happening within Ellie and Anna's bodies. So when this fungus forms a human face, as it does every episode, we now see it as the face of Anna. And when there are two figures left, whereas every episode before we've seen them as Joel and Ellie, now we can look at them as a mother and a daughter. For every step Ellie has taken, her mother has been there with her. And both of them have this tragic fungal link. So when Marlene finds Anna, Anna has the knife to her throat. She's ready to kill herself the moment she begins to feel herself turning. She says she didn't want to nurse the baby, and that's because nursing mom's milk has antibodies that helps newborns' immune systems form. She didn't want any kind of fluid exchange. Anna insists that she cut the cord before she was bitten, but in truth, she does not know. She is lying to Marlene, just as Joel will lie to Ellie about the Fireflies at the end of the episode. Therefore, this episode opens and closes with a lie, and not even noble lies told in the interests of all society, but lies really told out of self-serving love. This lie will haunt Ellie like a curse, as her caretakers lie to keep her from getting killed. Baby Ellie cries at the sound of the gunshot that kills Anna, and even though there's no way Ellie could remember this today, we cut from these newborn cries to Ellie meditating now, as if deep down she knows the cost of these lies. The cost of lies is actually the theme of Craig Mazin's past amazing HBO series, Chernobyl. What is the cost of lies is really the opening line of the pilot, actually. And you can see that theme now influencing Mazin's work on The Last of Us, as he and Neil Druckmann have explored another version of that, what they have called the danger of unconditional love. When you love someone so absolutely that you defy the greater societal good. Because love, while often seen as a wonderful, redeeming thing in fiction, can also be a blinding, toxic force. On their way into Salt Lake City, Joel calls to Ellie a few times, but she zones out. On your way into Salt Lake City in the game, Ellie is similarly a bit spacey. She doesn't always reply to Joel when he talks to her, and I love how they adapted that here. Joel has found a can of ravioli Chef Boyardee, which is what they wolfed down while camping in episode 4. Joel also scavenged a boggle from this RV, which is less depressing than the photo in the game you find with "Forgive Us" written on the back. We're really seeing Joel starting to psychologically nest. He tells Ellie he saw a guitar in the RV, and as in the game, he tells her he wants to teach her how to play. We saw a guitar in the background of his home back in episode 1, and Ellie playing the guitar plays a big role in part 2 of the games. The building they pass through has red tarps hanging over the scaffolding, making a foreboding vibe when Joel is chasing Ellie that gets resolved nicely with the giraffes. It actually goes down the same way in the games. Ellie leaves Joel hanging with the ladder, and he keeps trying to catch up to her so they both can get to an opening and see the passing giraffes. This season has actually teased giraffes in a few places. There's a stuffed giraffe on the ground as Joel, Tess, and Ellie left Boston in episode 2. There's a giraffe poster on the wall of that teenage girl's bedroom back in Jackson. And fun fact about giraffes, they don't have larynxes, no voice boxes. So when they scream, nothing comes out. And the music in this section is such a sweet relief. It's the same string music that played over Bill and Frank's Last Day in Lincoln in episode 3. But unlike the game, they actually feed the giraffe here, making this moment feel like that sweet calm between the storms beat in Jurassic Park, when a reluctant father figure Dr. Grant and those kids feed a brachiosaurus. Joel and Ellie gaze out over the baseball field, and Ellie says, "You can't deny that view," calling back a similar moment when they were looking out over the city of Boston in episode 2. Joel offers Ellie a chance to turn back, but Ellie says they have to go through with it, that it can't all be for nothing, which sets up Joel's ultimate choice to be that much more heartbreaking, because he is robbing her of the possibility of their journey having a real impact on the world, or making Sam's death matter. They find an army triage camp where Joel went to get treated for the bullet wound that they mentioned back in episode 3, some mystery man who shot and missed, whom Joel now reveals as himself. In the game, Joel considered suicide after Sarah died, but here he actually attempted it. Similarly, we should note, as Ellie's biological mother, Anna, with the knife, nearly killing herself. The danger of unconditional love. All this time, Joel has had that scar on his temple, and Ellie has had the burn scar over her eyebrow from some past incident she and Riley referred to that happened at a 7-Eleven. Joel says that when he went to pull the trigger, he flinched and still doesn't know why. And it might be because, deep down, he knew that there was someone out there he would love just as much. They read more puns from Will Livingston's No Pun Intended. People are making apocalypse jokes like there's no tomorrow. I love how it's not too soon, it's just topical. But the third joke is, what did the green grape say to the purple grape? Breathe, you idiot. And it's here that they get hit with the stun grenade from the Fireflies, which is a major change from the game. There, Joel and Ellie have a much more extended sequence where they go under the tunnels, they run into multiple bloaters, and they get caught in a dangerous rush of water that Ellie almost drowns in, because remember, she cannot swim, so that Joel has to perform chest compressions when the Fireflies knock him out. So, breathe, you idiot may be a nod to what Joel was thinking during that CPR in the game. And Joel wakes up to Marlene, the Queen of Hearts herself in our Wonderland. She explains that Ellie's cordyceps grows in her brain, that Ellie has had it since birth, they think, and that it sends a chemical messenger to tell other cordyceps that she is cordyceps too. Now, the issue with this is, even though that bite that Ellie got in the mall never grew past her arm, that she can receive bites and not get further infected, other infected clickers and runners and bloaters have still looked at Ellie as a target to bite. She still smells like fresh meat to external cordyceps. She doesn't have that kind of hive mind effect that the infected had with Tess. So that chemical messenger may be real, but it only exists within Ellie's body. It doesn't extend to other infected who will still rip her apart. So this chemical messenger would be kind of a cure, but really just a half measure. All it would do is make it so that a bite wouldn't turn you, which is valuable, but you would still have all these runners and clickers and bloaters trying to rip your head off. I just think this gives a bit more of a reason for Joel to call bullshit on this procedure. Would it make that much of a difference to just inoculate a bunch of people if there's still millions of clickers running around? The world is probably a bit too far gone to really turn the tide. But either way, this ethical dilemma, not trusting science to make the executive decision, has really been seeded from the beginning. That 1960s talk show where the leading epidemiology failed to prevent this, Fedra killing a kid for Joel to burn, Ellie not trusting her Fedra education where her teachers would refuse to admit the history of how they let the world go to shit, Bill thinking the government were all Nazis, Kathleen executing Kansas City's doctor in cold blood. They all now live in a world where science and medicine have failed humanity epically, so short-term needs have taken the higher priority. Joel is marched out, but he stops to take note of the floor map and spots that pediatrics and pediatric surgery are on level 6. So Joel kills the guards and methodically goes to town on the Fireflies. Now in the game, this is really the final challenge, and it's hard as hell. You have to do a mixture of sneaking around and misdirection and perfectly timed headshots to get past all the Fireflies. You gotta pick your battles. Some are worth just sneaking past and not killing. And as you are playing this, you just feel like a horrible person. You're an active shooter with an objective to stop the world's possible salvation. So this sequence is shot not as a thrilling action sequence, but really just a cold-hearted line of executions where the gunfire and action sounds are pushed in the background and a dark version of the main show's theme plays over it all. And we see each shell hit the ground. We are taking account of every person Joel kills, including one guy who surrenders and Joel kills anyway. At one point, we see Joel switching to an assault rifle. This is something that happens about halfway through this stage of the game, and it definitely gives you a leg up. And Joel makes it all the way to pediatrics, and he passes a mural of an elephant and a monkey, and on the other side of the wall, it's harder to see in Joel's periphery, but a giraffe. That silent, gentle giant that represented Joel's peaceful nesting with Ellie at this moment means nothing to him. There is no peace in his heart. As in the game, Joel finds Ellie on that operating table with a doctor and 2 nurses, and Joel executes the doctor and takes Ellie. And the camera stays on this dead surgeon for a moment. This ain't an accident. It sets up things to come. More on this in spoiler corner. But carrying Ellie to the elevator in the game is also a pretty big challenge, as you have to sprint past the gunfire while not being able to shoot back because Ellie's in your arms. Joel runs into Marlene in the parking garage, who in this version I thought was interesting, left out the threat that Ellie could get by raiders in the future. But what we saw with David last episode was pretty extreme. But smartly, they leave in one of my favorite structural choices from the game. We cut from Joel considering Marlene's points directly to Joel driving, looking like he's alone in the car because Ellie's not in the front seat with him. And there is this look of grief on his face. And for a moment, we think he is alone and he left Ellie back at the hospital. But a moment later, we see Ellie shifting in the back seat and we realize he's stuck to his guns. And what Pedro Pascal does here is so good. He closes his eyes and he shakes his head slightly, making us think that he just made a terrible, terrible mistake. And for a second, we really do think, did he just leave Ellie behind? But no, now we realize his anguish that he's feeling is actually guilt for making the selfish decision to save Ellie at the expense of the whole world. Like Anna lying to Marlene about the timing of Ellie's birth in the opening, now Joel lies to Ellie. He says the Fireflies doctors had failed to derive a cure from dozens of immune people.
The doctors, they couldn't make any of it work. They've stopped looking for a cure.
Yeah, I love how the bang of Joel shooting Marlene interrupts the flow of Joel's sentence now. We see how Joel did not give Marlene even a chance.
You've just come after her.
Yeah, Joel knows that to leave anyone left behind from Salt Lake City is going to be creating an enemy who will come back for Ellie and himself. They return to Wyoming, and as they take their final hike toward Jackson, Joel finally begins to talk about Sarah, something he never allowed himself to do in front of Ellie, and it's because he can imagine Ellie and Sarah being friends and making each other laugh. And as in the game, in this final moment, Ellie paces in frustration and reveals what really happened when she was bitten, how she was with her best friend Riley, and she has carried that guilt with her, along with the deaths of Tess and Sam. Joel says that's not on her, but Ellie cuts him off, saying,
Swear to me that everything you said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
And we end on just a long pause as Bella Ramsey emotes an extreme close-up that she is really thinking this over, going back and forth before she finally decides.
Okay.
And we cut to black. End of season. This okay was a choice by Ellie. I think she knows that Joel was probably lying to her, or at least not telling the complete truth. And she knows that there will be consequences for that lie someday. But she's mature enough now to know that to step forward and accept a version of reality is just a choice every adult has to make at some point. Previously, her daughterly affection for Joel was something she could just offer with youthful glee and humor. But now she's more of his equal, and she feels the weight that this kind of selfish companionship bears on the rest of the world. She knows the cost of lies, and she feels the danger of love. Okay, now that we are done with season 1, let's break down the new characters for season 2. And again, no spoilers for now. Season 2 is comprised of 7 episodes set 5 years after season 1. And since the majority of those episodes were in 2023, we are now in the year 2028. Season 2 is only adapting the first part of part 2 of the game that came out in 2020. We just learned that season 3 was greenlit by HBO, which will adapt the second major portion of the game that introduces a new major point of view character. New characters that we meet in the Jackson community in season 2 include Dina, played by Isabella Merced, and Jesse, played by young Mazzino. Also in Jackson is a new character to the show named Gail, played by Catherine O'Hara, who is Joel's therapist and reportedly the wife of Eugene, a Jackson resident from the game who is dead by the time we learn about him. But he will be played in the season by Joe Pantoliano, so we are going to flash back to when he was still alive. Caitlin Deaver plays a major new character named Abby, who's a new antagonist who was part of the group of Fireflies in Salt Lake City that Joel attacked to save Ellie at the end of season 1. Also in Abby's group is Manny, played by Danny Ramirez, yes, Joaquin Torres, Falcon from the MCU, and Mel, played by Ariella Bearer, and Nora, played by Tatiana Gabrielle, and Owen, played by Spencer Lord. We also know that at some point in season 2, we will get to Seattle, and we're gonna meet a few new groups in the Seattle area. The Washington Liberation Front, or WLF, aka the Wolves, led by Isaac, who's played in the game and in the show by Jeffrey Wright. The WLF is at war with another group called the Seraphites, or Scars. They are a cult who mostly use pre-outbreak technology, and they follow in the footsteps of the Prophet, a woman who died long before we meet the group, and we never meet in the game, but I think we are going to see a flashback scene that introduces us to the woman who becomes the Prophet sometime before Outbreak Day, or maybe during Outbreak Day. Like, doesn't it seem like something the show might do to show us Seattle going to shit during the outbreak? Look, I know there's a lot of story from part 2 of the game that could just be adapted directly into the show line for line, but that's not at all what happened in season 1, remember? Like, season 1 1 invented entirely new scenes. The 1968 talk show, the Jakarta mycologist, and Bill and Frank. We never saw those in the game, and Craig Mazin is going to be filling out this world with expanded mythology in season 2. I just know he will. Like, we already know Eugene will get his own episode in his own subplot. So another pre-outbreak scene that would just be kind of tough for gamers alone to predict seems very possible for the show. Okay, we are now in our Spores of Spoilers section. If you haven't played part 2 of the game and you don't want to know what's coming, leave. Don't watch the video from here forward. We're going to end all of our The Last of Us coverage here on New Rockstars this way and save all of our major discussions of spoilery stuff and parts for things we know from the game will be happening on the show. All of that is going to happen at the end of our videos, and I just want to give you a chance to back out. Okay, as of this taping, I have only seen the first episode of season 2. I do not know what happens in the 6 episodes beyond that, and I do not have any information about when the big thing happens, which players of part 2 of the game know is Abby scoring her vengeance on Joel and murdering him with a golf club. In the game, it happens relatively early. They shock you with it in the first hour or so. But I don't know, I've been hearing some hints among reviews and influencers who got on the good media list to watch all 7 episodes early that this season might just have a different structure. I don't know, we'll see. Also, I do not think we're gonna switch to Abby's point of view until season 3, or maybe in the season 2 finale, maybe to give viewers a sense of how season 3 will feel. Craig Mazin has said in the past that we probably will not get to the final section of part 2 of the game, Santa Barbara, until season 4. For now, only a season 3 has been greenlit though. We do know from trailer footage that we are going to get the very, very sweet scene that's structured like a flashback in the game, showing Ellie's birthday about a year after the return of Jackson, when Joel takes her to the museum, into the space capsule, and plays for her recovered audio of the Apollo 11 launch, which I've talked about in other videos is beautifully ironic for Pedro Pascal, whose other big release this year is Fantastic Four First Steps, which was directly inspired by the Apollo 11 crew. All right, comment down below with what you love the most about The Last of Us Season 1 and what you're most looking forward to for The Last of Us Season 2. And thank you so much for watching this extended breakdown compilation of The Last of Us Season 1. It was very helpful for us to revisit all of these episodes. Special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Frederick Price, who supports us at the executive producer level. If you want to support New Rockstars, just click that join button, and thank you so much. You can follow me at EA Voss, subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.